Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday, January 10th, 2023 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Roll call, please, Madam Secretary.
Turn on every mic. Give me one moment. Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Patterson. Just walked into the room. Director Young.
I'm here.
Director Chan.
Present.
President Lenny.
Here. It seems odd not to recognize our new director, Chan, here at today's meeting. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're excited to have some new blood, new director on the board.
Can I just say really quickly that I am so proud to be part of EBMUD, and I am so proud to be a member of the board of directors who I really feel are stalwarts and champions for their community.
Thank you, April. Okay, so we're on to public comment in the closed session. If members of the public are online or wish to make their public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. And let me see, this is a little unusual because we have people here. Should we?
I don't have any hands online just yet, so you can
Okay.
go ahead with the
So
in-person
go-
comments.
Good.
I did the in-person first and mine.
All right. So Eric Larson, I'll have you go first.
Thank you, President Lenny. Good morning, board members, General Manager Chan, and welcome to our new Director, April Chan.
Thank you.
Congratulations and
Thank
welcome
you.
to the Board of Directors. I wanted to provide a brief comment before you adjourn to closed session regarding COVID testing. The district continues to rely on the Department of Industrial Relations Government Code 3205 for guidance on COVID prevention. As such, under subsection 7D, COVID-19 testing must be made available at no cost to symptomatic employees during employees' paid time. The district needs to provide test kits or reimbursement for the cost of test kits and the appropriate time codes, not sick leave, for testing on company time, not employee time. Currently, the district is relying on employees to provide a negative test if they're symptomatic and don't otherwise have an explanation for what's causing the symptoms. Are required to provide a negative test in order to return to work, and currently the district has been relying on the employees providing their own tests provided from the federal government or from their healthcare provider. Healthcare providers are only providing 4 per month. The federal government is only providing 4 per month. So if the district is going to require a negative test to return to work, the district needs to provide some mechanism for reimbursement. They either need to provide the test kits or a mechanism for reimbursement and an appropriate time code for the time it takes to acquire said test kit, take the test, and provide that negative test documentation to the district. That's all I have. Thank you.
Strikes me as a reasonable request. Joey Smith, I have one card here, doesn't have a name on it, for agenda item number 10.
That's it, Vet, I believe.
No, we'll have you fill it out later. Thank you. All right, Joey Smith.
Good morning, Director Lenny.
Good morning.
Staff. It's 2023. Happy New Year or Happy New Year. Either way you look at it, it's up to us to make 2023 the best that it can be for us. I welcome Director Chan, and I welcome everybody back here. It's our first time all really being here with an audience. And we have to remember that we are always with an audience, no matter where we are or how we are. Even if that audience is of one, yourself. We have to remember to be of our values at East Bay MUD and in our own morals. That being said, I'm looking forward to working with all of you, each and every one of you, this year. Additionally, we just got word that one of our own have passed recently. Her name is Susan Rexon. She's been at the district for over 20 years, almost 25. And I would appreciate us closing the meeting in her honor because she was a very dedicated East Bay MUD employee and a wonderful union member. May she rest in peace. And may we remember just how important it is to take care of our employees as well as our families. Because if we want to get back to being Mother MUD instead of just the district, it takes us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. Next speaker, Yvette Rivera.
Thank you, Director Linney. I just want to start off by welcoming Director April Chan.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you having you here. It's always wonderful to have an even more diverse board representing East Bay MUD. I'm going to go ahead and speak directly to Director Chan. I just wanted to let you know that in the coming years, because you will be here for a few years, you're going to hear me speak up for those here at the district that are too scared to speak up for themselves. There are numerous lawsuits that I'll be referring to that have happened over the past 30 years. We have several directors, and I would want to say all of the directors want to change the course of what's happened in the past 30 years. I will expand on that later. I did pass out 2 documents, and the rest of the board members have received all of them, so I just want to make sure that you have received them today. One is Exhibit 108, and this is from a current lawsuit that's happening. It's Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland against East Bay MUD. It's 2 women that worked in the legal department as attorneys, one African American, one Asian, and this exhibit is a response by Saji Pierce to East Bay MUD's investigation of one of her complaints. It's very illuminating, and I will read from it in future board meetings. A document that I referred to this morning that you maybe weren't in the room to hear about was an EEOC determination that I provided the district before, and I'm providing it today because you've arrived. It's an EEOC determination for Stanley P. McIntosh, and it was a class action filed against the district for discriminating against blacks, but the EEOC determination noted that the district discriminated against blacks and Asians. The last document behind the EEOC complaint is a picture of my Pathways graduating class. Previous Pathways classes allowed participants to get on-the-job training. My class did not. I want to say that as a result of that, no women in that class promoted. And this, you're going to hear at the district that the district favors engineers. Well, if you look at this picture, there are 2 Asian female engineers. They couldn't even get promoted. Again, you're going to be here for a while, so I will catch you up. I hope the district, and I'm going to let you go because I'm going to speak for item number 10. Thank you for your time. I yield.
All right, thank you, Yvette. Do we have any other speakers?
We have no other hands for public comment. We have no hands online.
All right, then, no more speakers. We will proceed to the Brown Act briefing. We'll now receive a presentation on the board's ethics policy and updates to the Brown Act and ethics laws.
We're going to bring up the presentation.
All right, well, good morning, President Linney, members of the board, and welcome, Director Chan. I'm here to give our annual Brown Act and Ethics update as required by District Policy 6.04. There we go. Today I will be quickly reviewing Policy 6.04, and then I'll go over legal developments in 2022 related to the Brown Act, conflicts of interest under the Political Reform Act, and conflicts of interest under Government Code 1090. Why are we here today? We're here because of Board Resolution 33414-04, which was adopted in 2004. And that is the resolution that adopted the ethics policy. And it mandates that the policy shall be annually reviewed by the Board of Directors together with a review of the Brown Act at the first meeting of the board in each calendar year or as soon thereafter as practicable. So we are right on schedule. The purpose of Policy 6.04 is to promote awareness of ethics, integrity, and fidelity as critical elements in board members' conduct and an achievement of the EBMUD mission. And the policy itself really summarizes the ethical duties of the directors of the district, and it references numerous legal authorities and district policies, and those include but are not limited to the California Constitution, the Political Reform Act, Government Code Section 1090, the Penal Code, the Elections Code, and the Municipal Utility District Act. It requires the Board of Directors to uphold state and federal constitutions and other laws that are applicable to the district, promote fair and open government, promote fair and equal treatment and avoid discrimination, safeguard the proper use of district policy and resources, safeguard confidential information, avoid conflicts of interest, adhere to political contribution laws, the district campaign finance ordinance, and election laws, avoid holding incompatible offices, exercise responsible financial management, ensure a healthy and transparent work environment. It's a very detailed policy, and it really does distill state laws that are applicable to your service as board members. And so I highly recommend that it be kind of the first stop for you when you have questions regarding your duties under various state laws in governance. So now I'd like to turn to the Brown Act. Last year, the Brown Act, there weren't too many major updates to the Brown Act. This year, there were some substantial changes, and so this year we'll be taking a bit of a deeper dive into some statutory changes to the Brown Act. As you know, the purpose of the Brown Act is to make sure that actions by a governing body be taken openly, and that the deliberations of the governing body be conducted openly. So talking about open meetings, you are all aware of AB 361, which is a 2021 law that amended the Brown Act to allow for remote board meetings as long as a state of emergency under CISA has been declared and is in effect, and state or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing, or the governing body has determined that as a result of the emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risk to health or safety of meeting attendees. Now, we are no longer under a resolution providing for remote authorization and for remote meetings, and the governor's declared state of emergency is going to be expiring on February 8th, 2023. Well, last year, recognizing some benefits to allowing board members to attend remotely, the the legislature passed AB 2449, which amended the Brown Act to allow members of a governing body to participate remotely in really limited circumstances, quite frankly, only emergency circumstances or for just cause. Now, when a board meets under AB 2449, much like under AB 369, when a board member attends from a remote location, the remote location doesn't need to be noted on the meeting notice in some circumstances. The agenda does not need to be posted at the remote meeting location, and the public does not need to be allowed access to the remote meeting location. But again, this can only be utilized for a board member for just cause, which is defined as child care or caregiving need that requires more remote participation, a contagious illness that prevents a member from attending in person, a need related to physical or mental disability, or travel while on official business of the legislative body or another state or local agency. The other means by which remote attendance may be utilized is in emergency circumstances, and those are circumstances under which a physical or medical emergency prevents in-person attendance. There are limitations on remote attendance and the use of this procedure that go beyond those under AB 361. First of all, only less than a quorum of the board may participate remotely. A quorum of the board must participate at a physical location accessible to the public. A member may not participate remotely for just cause more than twice in a calendar year. These next ones are for meeting under the emergency exception, and for that, if a board member wishes to meet due to an emergency circumstance, the member must make a request to do so as soon as possible, preferably in advance of publication of the agenda. If that can't be done, then the agenda may be modified at the meeting pursuant to the statutory authorization to modify an agenda after publication. But the request must be placed on the agenda, and including a brief description for the reason of the request. That description does not need to include personal medical information, but a brief description does have to be included. The board must vote on the request, and I will note that the Brown Act is not clear as to whether a board member can vote on their own request. However, because this board is compensated, in a sense, based on board meeting attendance, you do have a financial interest in your attendance, and so therefore I would recommend that board members recuse themselves from voting on their own request to attend under emergency circumstances.
Derek, real quick question. What is the definition of just cause?
So just cause is child care,
Okay.
caregiving needs, so it was
Okay.
in that slide. So
Okay.
it is a very specific statutory
Okay, thank you.
definition. Just cause, and you may utilize a just cause remote attendance twice a year, and for that you do not need to, there does not need to be a vote or agendization of that. So, and finally, when a board member is attending remotely, you must disclose the presence of other adults, I should say, in the room, persons of 18 years or older, and their relationship to you. You don't need to disclose the attendance or the presence of people in the room who are less than 18 years old, which your grandchildren, they tend to announce themselves. So.
It's true.
Don't believe Director Coleman's are the only ones.
Just wanted to explore the element of the item must be placed on the agenda. Is that a matter of law that upon the request, the agency governing board must consider the item because of the request? Is that the way it's set up?
Yes. So for an emergency exception, the item must be placed on the agenda and considered and voted upon by the board. If the emergency arises less than 72 hours after publication, we can use the Brown Act procedures to modify the agenda at the beginning of the board member, at the beginning of the board meeting.
And back to the just clause part, if there's not a just cause, or there's a reason other than just cause, what happens then? I'm not clear.
If a board member wishes to attend remotely for reasons other than just cause or an emergency, they may do so pursuant to the existing provisions of the Brown Act that allow for that. However, that remote attendance must be agendized. The agenda must be posted at that remote location, and the
Okay.
public must be allowed to access that remote location.
As it was last year.
Exactly.
And the location has to be on the published agenda, which would mean practically we need to notify the secretary well in advance of the 72 hours.
That is correct. Well, in enough advance time that the location can be added to the agenda. So, if it's a hotel room, if it's your home, wherever it is, if you're traveling, you do need to figure out that schedule and then provide the secretary with that location so that an exact address can be provided.
So that would be like Thursday morning when the agenda's posted Thursday.
That would be probably the absolute latest
Okay.
that
Yeah.
you should let us know.
Wednesday,
Just so practically speaking, I think Director Katz is saying is, I mean, there's the 72 hours, but practically speaking, for us putting together the agenda, we would need to know before then.
Absolutely, yes. You'd be working on Risha's schedule, so.
And
my button just came off. The less than a quorum still applies to that as well, right? If there's a quorum, I mean, it seems be rather unusual, but if, more than 3 board members were absent, maybe 2 for just cause and 1 who was, at a conference in somewhere, and was posted and all of that, how would that?
That, I believe
A
that.
mixture of the current Brown Act provisions and this. How
Yeah,
would that-
I happen to know the answer to that.
Okay.
A quorum may not participate remotely outside of the district's boundaries. So,
Okay.
but I believe, and, we may request to double check this, I believe that a quorum can participate within the district boundaries remotely with the proper notice procedures, but outside the district would violate the Brown Act.
That is correct. And so
Okay.
I can see there being certain circumstances where there would be kind of an amalgamation of different statutes. But I think under all of them, at the very least, a quorum would need to be within
Present within the ward.
the ward,
district
yes, whether they are
boundaries.
remote or not.
But there's, of course, practical issues around, publishing a personal address. There's practical issues around, legal issues around ADA access at the location that we publish.
That is correct, yes. And so those are considerations that should be kept in mind when deciding whether or not you would meet remotely.
So Derek, one more thing. If it's, let's say somebody's traveling for business or otherwise, they're in a hotel room, you usually don't know your hotel room number until you check in. So the hotel is sufficient just to say the hotel and the location of the hotel?
My recommendation would be to provide the address of the hotel.
Okay.
And then provide the receptionist information.
Okay.
That they should provide your room number.
Thank you.
Another amendment to the Brown Act this year was as a result of a case called Sierra Watch versus Placer County. That was a 2021 case, and in that case, the public agency was considering a plan related to a development and environmental documentation related to a proposed, I believe it was a residential development. The agenda for the item was published, and the board as required by the board. By the Brown Act, the materials to be presented to the board were provided at the public office 72 hours in advance of the meeting. Over the weekend, apparently, staff made had some further negotiations with the developer, and changed the development agreement, and some environmental documents were tweaked. Those were provided to the public, I believe, only one day prior to the board meeting at the offices, which I believe, at least for part of the time, were closed. And so the court held that was a violation of the Brown Act, because the documents have to be made available 72 hours in advance under the letter of the law. Now, that's obviously a problem for an organization like the district, given that we tend to post our documents on Friday and our meetings are on Tuesday, and so there's not a 72-hour period where our offices are posted to the public. So under AB 2647, in reaction to this case, the legislator has stated that as long as the original agenda materials were made available for physical public inspection at least 72 hours provided prior to the board meeting, then updated materials need only be posted on the agency's website when they're received. And so that allows some more flexibility. Another statutory change to the Brown Act last year that takes effect this year is SB 1100. And really, it's just a clarification. The Brown Act under existing law allows the removal of an individual or individuals when a group or group of persons willfully disrupts the meeting. The updated law makes it clear that the board may remove an individual when an individual disrupts the meeting. It requires the presiding member to warn the individual and defines disrupting behavior as follows. Disrupting means engaging in behavior that actually disrupts, disturbs, impedes, or renders infeasible the orderly conduct of the meeting and includes, but is not limited to, one of the following. A failure to comply with a reasonable and lawful regulation adopted by the legislative body under the Brown Act for the conduct of meetings, or engaging in behavior that constitutes use of force or a true threat of force. And a true threat of force means a threat that is sufficient indicia of intent and seriousness that a reasonable observer would perceive it to be an actual threat or a use of force by a person. So what would be an example of this? And I think a common example across public agencies is the 3-minute speaker rule. For some agencies, it's 2-minute speaker rule. And here at the district, occasionally folks go over as they're finishing a thought, but we've really been fortunate that everyone that I've observed at least has really respected the 3-minute speaker rule. Some agencies, however, individuals will attempt to use public speaking times as a means of trying to essentially filibuster further action by the governing body. So this statute makes it clear that when it becomes clear that the person intends to use speaking time as an example for the purpose of disrupting a meeting, the person may be removed after provided a warning by the president of the governing body.
What I see in here is a bit of, I think we are in a little bit of a I think we have a responsibility to define this a little bit more at our local level. I think a 3-minute speaker rule and going a mere second beyond that, I think it leaves us open to some use of discretion by the presiding officer, and we may want to have a standing policy that's a bit more explicit about what's a degree of breach that would lead to removal from the meeting. And I would normally rather the presiding officer exercise good judgment, but it looks like the new law requires a policy to be in place.
The law does not require a policy for removal to be in place, but it does require.
Well, yeah, I see it includes, but is not limited to. So.
Yes. So I think that's a policy discussion. I think that the law currently allows the presiding member to have discretion, and I think necessarily so. Some folks go over, and it really is apparent that they're finishing a thought, finishing their sentence. So I'm not quite sure how you would draw a hard and fast line, like 4 minutes you're out. But I mean, we can have further discussion on that.
Yeah, I think that explanation helps a lot. So if we see other government jurisdictions elaborating with policies, we might want to follow suit. But I think that explanation helps a lot. Thank you.
This year there was an Attorney General opinion, number 21-1102. That was requested by State Assembly Member Christopher Ward. Interestingly, Assemblymember Ward did not give any background as to why he was requesting this opinion, but it did answer some questions that I think illustrate some of the restrictions of the Brown Act and also answered a new new question that under which there had been some disagreement among public agencies and various attorneys. So I'll just run through those right now. The Assembly member requested opinion, asked basically, can legislative support staff attend to city council closed session meetings? And also asked whether two public agencies could meet jointly in closed session. And as to the support staff, his reasoning was, well, support staff is necessary to administer the meeting, take notes, and provide their council member with relevant information. So I always, if any of you are a fan of the show Veep, there was Gary who was always whispering in Selena Meyer's ear all of the facts that she needed to know. So the question is essentially, can Gary attend closed session meetings? So the answer to the first question was no. Only persons with an official or essential role in particular closed session may attend the closed session meeting. The Attorney General reasoned that, first of all, there are no details provided on what administrating a meeting means, and so no basis for an opinion that they're necessary. For note-taking, the Brown Act specifically authorizes an agency to designate a clerk or other officer to take notes. So there's really no other authorization that just legislative staff can attend and take notes. And providing information is not essential. So having a staff person there to provide you with information you need, the Attorney General opined was not essential to the attendance at the closed session meeting, and that is to be construed given the narrow focus, the narrow exceptions under the Brown Act in which persons can attend a closed session. So then Assemblymember Ward had a second question. So if staff can't attend meetings, can council members share information with them to have their support staff assist them in performing follow-up duties? And the opinion was no, unless the city councils authorize the disclosure of such information. And basically, the Attorney General went through all the Brown Act and other laws that required that closed session information be kept be kept confidential. And so under the question as presented as to the particular sports staff, the Attorney General opined that City Council support staff could not be provided with information as to what was discussed in the closed session in furtherance following up. And then the final question was a new, previously an unanswered question, and that was, may the City Council meet jointly in closed session with the city's Board of Housing Commissioners? These were essentially separate bodies with separate governing bodies. And there had been some differences of opinions because the Brown Act does not specifically authorize a joint closed session between at which two or more agencies may attend. And the Attorney General opined that, yes, the Brown Act does not prohibit joint closed sessions, and provided that the statutory authority exists for each body to meet in closed session, and the Brown Act authority for the closed session itself applies, they may meet jointly. So an example of this would be if two public agencies are co-defendants in a case, there are circumstances under which they may meet jointly. It has to be a fact-specific inquiry. So for instance, if the public entities also have cross complaints against each other, that would probably weigh against joint closed session meetings.
But in our case, for instance, the retirement board and the board of directors could meet in closed session.
That is correct. So I'd like to turn to the Political Reform Act. As we know, it governs conflict of interest and decisions affecting a financial interest, and requires public disclosure of personal financial information, which we do in our Form 700s. It governs political campaign contributions, spending, and advertising, and lobbyist financial disclosures and practices. The Political Reform Act prohibits a board member from directly or indirectly participating in a governmental decision in which the member has a financial interest. And there are, under the regulations, there are many different types of financial interests, and it really is an analysis that is to be done in each case. But there are 5 types of specifically enumerated financial interests that may just result in disqualification of an officer's participation in a decision. That is investment of $2,000 or more in a business entity, real property valued at $2,000 or more, an income source of $500 or more in the prior 12 months, gifts of $520 or more in the prior 12 months, although that has been raised, personal finances of an official or immediate family. Gift of limitation. So the Political Reform Act, until last year, prohibited gifts from a single source with a total value of more than $520. The act requires a cost of living adjustment on January 1st of each odd-numbered year. For effective January 1st, 2023, the gift limit is $590 until December 31st, 2024. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Another statutory change to the Political Reform Act was the expansion of the Levine Act to elected officials. The Levine Act prohibits an officer from accepting, soliciting, or directing a contribution of more than $250 from any person or party with a matter pending before the agency involving a license, permit, or other entitlement for use. Now, a license, permit, or other entitlement for use includes a contract, includes all contracts, other than competitively bid, labor, or personal employment contracts. Until January 1st of this year, the prohibition applied only to appointed officials. Under Senate Bill 1439, effective January 1st, the prohibition applies to elected officials, which means that it now applies to you. Now, East Bay MUD's Campaign Finance Reform Ordinance prohibits you from accepting any donation in any amount from persons with contracts or other matters before the board. However, the Levine Act goes further than East Bay MUD's Campaign Finance Reform Ordinance in some respects. It includes contracts, but it also applies to a license, permit, or other entitlement for use, and so there could theoretically be circumstances in which, for instance, an appeal, a matter is under appeal on a wastewater discharge permit that may come before the board. That rarely happens, if ever, but if it did, the Levine Act would apply. It applies not only to parties to contracts, but also participants to the entitlement, and that includes persons who may oppose an entitlement or a contract. The restriction on donation ends 1 year after the action on the entitlement, regardless of whether or not the entitlement is granted. Under the district's campaign finance ordinance, the restriction ends either after if the board denies a contract or entitlement, then the restriction ends upon the denial. If it's granted, then it is 12 months. But this is 1 year after the action on the entitlement, regardless of whether the entitlement is granted. Furthermore, under the Levine Act, if an officer knows they've accepted a donation from a party or participant in the 12 months prior to the consideration of the entitlement, they must announce the donation and recuse themselves from participation. Last year, I talked a bit about property interests and the proximity of projects to the residential property of governing officials. And I wanted to talk about that again this year because there are a couple of opinions from the Fair Political Practices Commission that discuss property interests in relation to both the Political Reform Act and Section 1090 and kind of the interplay between the two. So these are not necessarily developments in the law, but really kind of clarifications and a reminder of some of the exceptions under the Political Reform Act. But if the board will recall, a reasonably foreseeable effect of a governmental decision on a parcel of real estate is considered material if it involves property less than 500 feet from the official's parcel, unless there's clear and convincing evidence the decision will not have a measurable impact on the parcel, or it involves property located more than 500 feet but less than 1,000 feet from the property line of the official's parcel, and the decision would change the parcel's development potential, income producing potential, highest and best use, character by substantially altering traffic levels, intensity of use, etc., or market value. So any one of these. If they're altered by a decision, then the reasonably foreseeable effect is considered material. So in the Bollinger advice letter from March 2022, city council member owned a residence 1,320 feet from city land that was to be leased to a golf club for the golf club's expansion. And this case kind of talks about property line limits. The city's council member's residence was across the street from the golf club itself, but not the land to be leased. And so the question presented to the FPC was, does the city council member have a disqualifying information in participating in the decision regarding leasing the land to the golf club because their residence is across the street from the golf course itself? The letter went through the rules. If the city council's member is 1,000 feet from or more from the official's property or property line, the financial effect is presumed not to be material. The presumption may be rebutted by clear and convincing evidence that the government official decision would not have a substantial effect on the official's property. And here the determination was, even though the city council member's residence was across the street from the golf club, the property to actually be leased was over 1,000 feet away, was out of view, was separated by several roads, and there's no clear and convincing evidence that the decision would have a substantial effect on his property. So that case kind of really discussed facts under which a portion of property to be affected might have an impact on a residential parcel. Another property-related letter, the Engberg advice letter. This was in Half Moon Bay. It was an interesting one because the city planning commissioner owned a residence less than 500 feet from a proposed city storm drain replacement and repair project. And it was actually the commissioner himself that went out one day near Highway 1 and noticed that the storm drain near his house was completely collapsing. And remediation of the storm drain required substantial construction. It required restoration of some habitat, installation of landscaping. It required permission from the California Coastal Commission and various permits from I believe the city and the county. And so given all of the decisions to be made, the question was, may the commissioner participate in decisions related to the approval of the repair project and submit comments on the project biological documents to the city staff and jurisdictional agencies. Now again, this residence was less than 500 feet from the proposed city storm drain project. So the financial effect is material again if it involves property less than 500 feet from the official's parcel. Absent clear and convincing evidence, the decision will not have a measurable impact on the parcel. Now here, there was probably going to be major construction less than 500 feet from the parcel. However, there is an exception under the PRA, and that is that the effect is not material if the decision solely concerns repairs, replacement, or maintenance of existing streets, water, sewer, storm drainage, or similar facilities. And so the determination was that despite its size, this project was for the repair, replacement, or maintenance of the storm drainage infrastructure, and so the commissioner's proposed actions will not have a material financial effect on his interest in the real property. That's good news for this body, given most of what we do is pipeline infrastructure projects. And so if one of them runs past the front of your house, then this is an exception that may apply to you. Turning to Section 1090, as you know, Government Code Section 1090 prohibits a public official employee from making a contract in which the official employee has a financial interest, and that is defined broadly as any act involving preliminary discussions, negotiations, compromises, reasoning, planning, drawing plans, and specifications and solicitations for bids. The prohibition is not only on the public official or employee, but if a member of the governing body has a financial interest in a contract, then the entire governing body is precluded from approving that contract unless an exception exists, even if the official abstains from participation. So, under the Zutler advice letter, the facts were a Healdsburg City Council member had been CEO of a nonprofit called Corazon, and then was elected to City Council. At last received her salary from Corazon on October 23, 2020, but she then worked as a consultant for Corazon and last received payment from Corazon on June 14, 2021. On October 4th, 2021, the city staff recommended to the city council that the city council negotiate an exclusive contract with Cortisone to administer the city's universal basic income program. So Cortisone was going to do intake, determine who was eligible to participate in the program, and distribute funds under the program. Question 1, does the council member have a conflict of interest under the Political Reform Act regarding any contract between the city and Cortisone? And the conclusion was yes, because under the rules, she's had a source of income of more than $500 within the preceding 12 months, and therefore it is reasonably foreseeable that any decision involving a contract with Cortisone would have a material financial effect on her interest. Therefore, she may not take part in decisions related to the contract and must recuse herself. Now, I've provided you with a copy of the Zutler letter, and you'll see that question 2 is not written out, but I've stated it separately because it was answered even though it was written out up front. And that question 2 was, does the council member have a conflict of interest under Section 1090 such that the city itself would be precluded from contracting with Cortisone? And the conclusion was no. Because the council member terminated her business relationship with Cortisone, she has no conflict of interest under Section 1090. So Section 1090 doesn't prohibit the city from entering into a contract. And the analysis relied on a previous Attorney General opinion that stated that an official does not have a financial interest in a contract if they've terminated their business relationship with a contracting entity prior to making the contract. And here, the council member had no current business relationship with Cortisone. So though she may not participate in decisions related to the Cortisone contract, the city itself is not precluded from contracting with Cortisone. And then finally, I have the Brady advice letter. This one discusses really the rule of necessity. So under a Southgate City Council member owned a mobile home on leased land in a mobile home park, and the city received bids from 3 waste haulers on a waste hauling service franchise. And one of the bidders, Universal Waste Systems, operated a composting facility only 372 feet from the mobile home park. They weren't a current waste hauler for the city, so this would be a new consideration of that contract along with the other 3 bids. First question, does the council member have a prohibited financial interest in the decision to award the waste hauling contract under the Political Reform Act? And the letter was, well, yes, if this contract is awarded to UWS, which does not have the current franchise, we can presume that there's going to be increased truck activity, perhaps additional odors, et cetera, at this composting facility. And there are 2 financial interests that gave rise to the potential conflict of interest. The first is real property valued at $2,000 or more. The FPPC said that does not give rise to a conflict of interest because that financial interest does not include leased properties. And so though the council member owned his mobile home, he was leasing the land from the affected parcel owner, and so a month-to-month residential lease is excluded from the definition of real property under the Political Reform Act. However, the FPPC determined that he did have a conflict of interest as to personal finances because for this, all of those impacts at the composting facility would probably essentially result in a loss of value, or there was a good chance it would result in a loss of value of $500 or more to the value of his mobile home as personal property. So, given that the council member had a financial interest in the contract, could the second question was, could the city consider the contract given that financial interest? And the FPPC concluded, yes, under the rule of necessity exception to 1090's prohibitions, the city may consider the contract so as long as the council member recuses himself from any involvement in the decision. So again, if Section 90 is applicable to one member of a governing body, the entire body is precluding from approving the contract. However, under the rule of necessity, a contract may be approved by the governing body, even if it otherwise would violate Section 1090, where the contract is for essential services and no other source triggering the conflict is available, and the approving body is the only body authorized to act to approve it. And here, waste hauling services are essential to the city. Only these types of contractors are authorized to perform waste hauling services, and only the city council is authorized to approve the franchise agreement.
I do have a question about that one.
Yes.
There were 3 bidders on that contract.
Yes.
So what, did they comment about that?
I don't recall a specific discussion on the fact that there were 3 bidders. Had UWS withdrawn its bid, it would have removed the conflict, obviously, but in that circumstance, I can't see a circumstance under which UWS would voluntarily agree to do so. But the fact that, and I think the reasoning is, the city council has an incentive to not award to UWS. So they can, as much as they have an incentive to award to one of the 2 other buildings, one of the 2 other bidders, they have an incentive to not award to UWS because of the potential impacts on the city council members' finances.
Oh, what I was curious about is it looks like the rule of necessity requires, as the second element that you've listed, the approving body is the only body authorized to act to approve it.
Yes.
Actually, no, that's not what I was calling out. I was calling out the no other source triggering the conflict is available.
Right, no other source, and I believe, typically this is, I think, applied to goods and services contracts, but for this, I believe what this, because there was no detailed explanation, but there is no other type of bidder that could perform this work. So it had to be a waste hauling franchise. It had to be a waste hauling services provider to bid on this type of work in order to remove the waste from.
Yeah, obviously the FPPC would have handled the facts, but I guess we might assume that the jurisdiction had a reason to dismiss the other 2 bids. Oh, like the other 2.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the
Oh,
question.
I'm just wondering if there were 3 bids, then how could there have just been one source? I'm curious about that.
Well, again, it goes back to the type of source. And so UWS had the right to bid on the contract. And so you have to look at all of the sources in the aggregate. Because insofar as, yes, there were 2 other contractual sources for those services, the 3rd source also has to be considered because it would have a financial impact. So insofar, like I said, insofar as you're approving one bidder, you may also be rejecting the other bidder because of its potential impacts, and that's the prohibited conflict, but for the exception. So that's why you look at the source in the aggregate, that type of contract, not necessarily each individual bidder as a separate source. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because UWS would then have a cause of action to, if they were precluded, they'd have a cause of action against the city for excluding them.
Correct.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I can't even imagine a legal means by which the city could preclude UWS from bidding in the first place. So,
As long as they met the RFQ.
exactly,
Yeah.
yes. So that's the end of my presentation for today. We always end with this slide that offers that ethics laws are many, multi-layered, and complex. I can tell you the regulations under the Political Reform Act there are dozens and dozens of them, and they are very, very granular. You should consult early and often with the Office of General Counsel and/or the FPPC, and I provided the phone number for the FPPC there.
One
Are there any
thing,
questions?
yeah, I just had a note that the limits that are discussed, many of us took the online ethics training that you have to take. It's really out of date.
I'm sorry, in our finance ordinance?
the ethics training that we have, AB, is it 1, 2, 3, 4? What's whatever, it has, I think, gift limits from 2015, it's just the training, the online training is from the FPPC or the Secretary of State's office, or whoever it is that offers it is out of date.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else sort of
It's the same
had that.
content that I took the very first time it was made available.
Yeah,
So,
it's not,
yeah.
hasn't been updated.
So the state is a little bit behind, so.
Yeah.
Quite a
A
lot.
lot of these laws went into effect on January 1st.
I'm sorry?
Excuse me, a lot of these laws went into effect January 1st.
I was talking about the gift limits, though,
The gift limit, the new gift limit, well, until January 1st of this year, it was $520.
yeah, well, it's 460 in the
Right,
training.
which is quite a
So,
few,
Yeah, I
quite a few
think
years
is
out of
the
date.
number.
All right.
420,
Any other
460,
questions?
something like that.
Any other questions for me? All right.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
your
Derek.
attention.
We will now convene to discuss closed session agenda items. We're scheduled to return to our regular board meeting at 1:15. All right, welcome everyone to our Tuesday, January 10th, 2023 regular business meeting, of the East Bay Mud Board of Directors, and Happy New Year. We will be receiving reports from this morning's Planning and Legislative Human Resources Committee meetings under item 10. Roll call, please, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan,
Present.
Director Coleman,
Present.
Director Katz,
Present.
Director McIntosh,
Here.
Director Patterson,
Present.
Director Young,
I hear.
President Lenny.
Here, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I got connected by pushing a bunch of buttons and I pushed it
I
out.
pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Before we move on to our election of officers, I just want to recognize our newest member of the board, April Chan. Welcome, Director Chan.
Thank you, Director Lenny.
Next order of business is our election of officers.
Mr. President,
Yes. Bill.
did Ms. Chan get sworn in?
Yeah.
Oh,
Good question.
did I miss it?
Yeah.
No, it happened before.
Oh,
Doug.
that's all, I just wanted to be sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Patterson.
Here.
We've done
Doug, I would-
performance.
I would
swearings in
nominate
here,
John
so.
Coleman for president and Andy Katz for vice president.
I was just about to open the nominations, and but you have gone ahead and
Thought
done
I'd
it.
streamline it.
Okay, I second.
What did you say?
You're asking for seconds yet, I second that.
I have a substitute, I have an
I like
offering.
that. Keep it
Yes,
going.
Bill.
It's been highly critical of East Bay Mud lately and our picture going forward. I would like to propose Lisa McIntosh for president. And the reason for doing that is I'm looking at the face of East Bay Mud, and I want to be consistent with D&I and all the other stuff that's going on that's putting us into the present. So I submit her name.
Bill,
I will heartily second that.
I made the nomination for John, and I'm comfortable with that.
Well, I know you're comfortable, but I'm not comfortable with the face of East Bay Mud. And I am just saying that I'm proposing this. This had nothing to do with John per se, but you're pushing an agenda that keeps status quo. The very thing that we're talking about changing in front. You may not realize that. So I have a second to my, we'll vote on, well, Mr. President, you take the action. I'm sorry.
I thought I was streamlining.
All right, so I do have, just to recount here, we have a motion by Director McIntosh to nominate John Coleman for president and for Andy Katz for vice president. That was seconded by Director Chan, that motion. And then I have a motion by Director Patterson to nominate Director McIntosh. And I didn't hear for vice chair, although I guess we do those separately, actually. We do that.
And the substitute motion has to be voted on.
Well, I think if more than one name is nominated, each nomination must be put to a vote. I'm just reading the rules here listed. Okay, so I'm going to look for guidance here to
So
make sure.
procedurally, I think you need to vote on the substitute motion first, and
Okay.
then if that passes, then it passes, and then if it doesn't pass, then you would vote on the original motion.
All right.
May I ask a point of order? Does the acceptance of the nomination have a material effect?
She did not accept.
I don't know that there's a law on that. No, I think that's just a consideration.
I didn't see that coming. And, you know, let me just pause and say this for clarity's sake. I actually love acting as president of this board. I love being a leader, not just a board member, but a leader of this board and of this organization. However, saying that, I've made my motion and I'm comfortable with it, and it's something that I've been pondering since our last meeting together back in December. And it's true. The face of the district is sort of becoming more and more, I don't even know how to say this tactfully, vanilla. And we do need more faces of color leading here. But I think at this moment in time, I'm going to not accept the nomination and go ahead and reiterate my motion for John Coleman as president. And I thank both Bill and Marguerite for their thoughtfulness in this.
Can I say something? I mean, I was not expecting Bill's nomination, and I support it wholeheartedly for the reasons that he stated, but also because this is our 100th anniversary year. And there's going to be a lot of eyes on us, and the work that we're doing on DEI as a board, and that you've been, you know, so much in the lead of, really is front and center. And I hear you, and I guess I'm hoping that there are steps we can take to share the love of our 100th year more broadly across the all members of the board, so that the president, whoever that may be, is not the sole person in the spotlight representing who we are, because I don't think any single one of us does represent who we are. So if you're not going to step up, then, you know.
It's not about stepping up, Marguerite.
No, you'll continue to lead. I know you will
I
continue to be a
step up,
leader.
but yeah, in this moment, I'm going to continue to support my motion, my nomination of John Coleman, and then Andy for vice.
Bill, do we need to withdraw the motion, or?
Yes.
Well, no, I'm not gonna withdraw. I want to be on record as trying to be in the progression of East Bay Mud in its 100th year moving forward, and how it is viewed by the outside public. You don't understand, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, then our whole DEI program is at risk because maybe we don't mean what we're saying. That's the way I see it. And the progressive way forward is to act. You just had four principles put in front of you from D&I. Management looking at itself, the board needs to look at itself. That's what I'm saying. And I stand on that. So you can do the protocol, Mr. President, whatever that is.
All right. You guys aren't making the last thing that I do here easy. But I'm taking it that we have a motion and a second on the floor, and that we need to take a vote on that. Do I hear otherwise?
So for clarity, you are voting on the secondary motion,
Substitute
substitute motion.
Right. Okay, can we have a roll call vote on that?
Yes. Which is the substitute?
Yeah, what is the
The
substitute?
substitute motion is for Lisa McIntosh.
Oh,
To be president of the board for 2023. Okay? And we're going to have a roll call vote. Director Chan?
No.
Director Coleman?
No.
Director Katz?
Abstain?
Director McIntosh?
I abstain.
Director Patterson?
Yes,
Director Young?
Yes.
President Lenny?
No?
Okay.
All right. We have
The original?
So now we go to the original
3
motion.
no, 2 yes, 2 abstentions.
Correct.
All right, so now we vote on the original, which is the nomination of John Coleman.
We're separating the two, right?
Yes, you have to
So now
separate the two.
second motion, the first one failed.
Right, no, but I mean, we're only voting on the president right now.
That's correct.
right,
Okay.
that's right. So let's have a roll call vote on that.
Okay? And that was a motion by Director McIntosh, second by Director Chan. Okay. Roll call. Director Chan?
Actually, I'm not, we're in the discussion phase of the
We can be in
motion.
the discussion phase before.
I just want to reiterate how important I think it is that the face of this district in its 100th year reflect the values and integrity of this organization. And I will be voting no.
All right, any other discussion? We'll go ahead with the vote then.
Okay, give me one moment, I'm taking notes. Director Chan?
Yes.
Director Coleman?
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
no,
Director Young?
No.
President Lenny?
Yes. All right, motion carries 5-2 vote. We will now, the second part of this, I will pass the gavel to,
We need to vote on vice president.
I have here,
That was part of the motion. I thought it was being separated.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
separated.
been separated.
Director Coleman, you'll handle that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Congratulations, John.
Now we need to go into the second position, which is for the vice president for the 2023 calendar year. And do we have a motion?
We had a motion.
I moved Andy Katz as
Okay.
vice president.
And April, you had seconded that?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Okay. Director Chan?
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director Lenny?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
abstain.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Coleman.
Yes.
Okay.
And welcome, Andy, as Vice President. If I can just say a few remarks here, I think would be appropriate. First, I'd like to thank the board members who did support me and the staff who we work with so closely. And I really need to thank Doug Lenny for all his leadership for the last 2 years of the pandemic. It's made a huge difference. You know, we're on our 100th year, and I've clearly heard that we need to be more diverse on how we act, and I make the commitment to all the board that it's not going to be just me doing things. It should be including every board member as appropriate, especially if an event is in their ward. That should be taking place, and they should be leading the effort at that appropriate time. I think that's critical. And, you know, we've had difficulty in the last 100 years in some cases. Well, now we're in a drought, maybe, maybe not. We'll find out later about that. And we have a lot to be proud of, but at the same time, there's things that we need to look at for the next 100 years. Clearly, it's the environmental aspects of our needing to maintain what we work on, clean, healthy water, providing financial stability and transparency when we work on all activities. And as Joey Smith said, this is Mother Mud, and we need to hold our heads high. And I believe with this board and the staff, we can and will do just that. And we need to also plan for the droughts when they come again, and look how we can work on reservoirs and storage, and especially in light of climate change, which is here today. It's not going to go away. And with that, I'm very honored, and I make the promise that everybody in the board is going to be included in all activities of the 100th anniversary as we move forward. So, with that, we've had the elections of officers and vice president.
President Coleman, if
Yes.
I may say a couple words too.
Sorry.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleagues who supported me, and including all of the board. I want to acknowledge the sentiment that we just expressed, that we're a team here, we're a group that acts as a whole, and respects and includes each and every one of our views as we come to a consensus on a variety of issues. From time to time, we have our debates and disagreements, but I appreciate the collegiality of when we work the best, and I think that's when we work together the best to come to outcomes. We had some discussion last year, and we wanted to include our newest director, and we need not resolve it right now, but I would like to point out that these are one-year terms for our officers, and I think that does help accelerate the sharing of leadership. And I'm supportive of that, and I'll just say that speaking for myself at this time. I'm very excited, like President Coleman expressed, about working with a new year and new challenges. We hopefully will see the drought behind us, but we still have the need to encourage conservation and efficiency among all of our customers. We have a critical importance of integrating diversity, inclusion, and equity, both among our workforce as well as the way we work with and interact with our customers and our communities. And that shows up in a number of ways, between workforce development, our customer assistance program enhancements, and also looking at economic development for job opportunities that can be equitable throughout the community. We have climate change in so many ways that shows up in the way the district is a leader on climate resilience, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Vice President Katz. Now you have before you a list of committees and JPA assignments. If you can complete that and get that to Risha as soon as possible, because our goal is to have those voted on at our next meeting in January. So that would be appreciated.
Excuse me,
Yes.
President Coleman, can I ask for a point of clarification? My notes here say that we need a motion and a second to close nominations for president and vice president. So just for a record, if I can get a motion, a second, and a vote to close the nominations for president and vice president.
It's been moved by Director McIntosh. Is there a second?
Second.
By Director Lenny to close nominations. Any further dialogue? Hearing none, we can do this by just, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed. It passes on a 7-0 vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm looking, I haven't looked at one of these sheets that Doug handed to me for a while. So in terms of announcements, there are no announcements required from closed session. Now we're on to public comment. And so we ask if you're virtual to please raise your hand in the Zoom motion. And comments on non-agenda items will be heard at this point. Yes, I'm sorry.
Bill was trying to get your.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the cheat sheet.
I just wanted to say that over the years, I have worked behind all of the successes and some of the trials that we didn't quite complete in unison with the board. I'll still be there. I haven't changed any of that. Not only will I be there, but I'll push harder to make sure that the offset is addressed through what we do and how we do it. I meant no disrespect to anybody in terms of what I was saying, and I think that's clear. But time is not on our side for where we are now. And there'll be some rough jaunts in the road ahead. But believe me, I'll be there to help you across the ditch and through the rut, because that's where I come from. I appreciate the board, and I will be strongly supporting our direction, especially in our 100th year, where all the communities of California and some across the nation will be looking to us, because East Bay MUD is not just a regional entity in that respect, but is a national entity in its accomplishments. And I want to make sure that people know we all did work together for those accomplishments. It's not an individual thing. And I would hope the collective of that would impart itself to get all of the goals and objectives we're after in our D&I and in our community representation of East Bay Municipal Utility District. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Patterson. Now we're on to public comment. If you are on Zoom, please raise your hand. At this point, we'll be calling on those for non-agenda items, and then those who wish to speak on agenda items will be called upon on each individual agenda. And we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments on Zoom?
No hands on Zoom at the moment.
Great, thank you very much. I do have 2 speaker cards for public comment. Cynthia Atkinson, how you doing?
Hi, yeah, it's really me. Proof of how fast 5 years go by. So, and I'm happily retired and keeping very busy. So 2 projects that keep me involved with East Bay MUD. One is the habitat restoration that I do on the EBMUD watershed along the Skyline Trail between the Tilden steam trains and the Berkeley Reservoir. We work closely with East Bay watershed staff, and we remove invasive species, a lot of Italian thistle and non-native grasses. And we help provide fire break assistance, and then we restore the area with local native plants. I've been at that since March 2017. But the second project that brings me here today is my position as the president of the board of directors for the Utility District Credit Union. I became a board member in late 2018 or early 2019 time kind of flows, right? And I'm here to introduce the new manager and taking the opportunity to promote and shamelessly market the close relationship between the Utility District Credit Union and East Bay MUD. So there's a little bit of history here. The credit union was organized in 1935 by East Bay MUD employees and chartered by the state of California. Obviously, this was born out of the height of the Depression, and the purpose of the UDCU then and now is to serve the financial needs of East Bay MUD employees and their families by providing them a safe and secure savings environment for its members. It never gets easier. For 88 years, the Utility District Credit Union has served East Bay MUD employees, retirees, board members, and any family members. It's a tightly knit relationship and somewhat symbiotic. The Utility District Credit Union offices have always been where East Bay MUD employees are located, affording members a personal experience when banking with the Utility District Credit Union. The Utility District Credit Union membership breakdown is about 65% active East Bay MUD employees, 25% retirees, and 10% family members. Since its inception, the credit union is overseen by a board of directors and a supervisory committee. And these committees are composed of East Bay MUD employees and retirees, and we're all volunteers. Current board members are Ramona Gonzalez, Barry Garden, Sunil Briscoe, Derry Moten, retiree Wanda Sykes, and me. And the supervisory committee is chaired by Juanita Eisen, and members include George Cleveland, David Correa, Karen Field, and Janetta Johnson. And did I say we're all volunteers? So now the news. Hassan Elmi is retiring at the end of the month. He's been a credit union employee for 32 years, and the last 17 years was the credit union manager. He steered the credit union through the Great Recession of 2008 and worked hard, very hard, to minimize the impact of COVID in 2020 and 2021. Under his astute management, as of November 30th, this 2022, the credit union has total assets of $37.8 million, 2,401 members with 3,809 accounts. And for 2022, as of November 30th, funded 130 loans for a total of $3.6 million. So obviously, Hassan knows how to manage our money. Equally important is his easygoing attitude and cheerful disposition that have endeared him to our members and have made him a part of the East Bay MUD family. He will be missed. And I want to thank him for his patience with the newer board members. Lord knows how many times we've peppered him with pretty basic financial questions. And as of yesterday, Anthony Rappa has come on board to take over the operations of the credit union. The decision to hire Anthony was a unanimous decision by the 5 board members, supervisory committee chair, and our admin assistant, one Rima Jones, who participated in the interviewing process. Anthony brings a strong knowledge of financials, along with the understanding and importance of the credit unions, the desire to grow the UDC membership, and to grow and promote the Utility District Credit Union employees. So please join me in congratulating Hassan on his retirement and welcoming Anthony to the Utility District Credit Union and the EBMUD family. So thanks.
Thank you. Hassan, thank you very much for all your service to the employees and retirees of East Bay MUD in your position as the credit manager, credit union manager. Now our next speaker is Anthony Rappa.
All right, hey. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here to speak to you in person. First, I'd like to thank Cynthia for the warm welcome. I really appreciate it. I just found out it was a unanimous decision, so I'm feeling pretty good about myself right now. Thank you. Like I just won the lotto. But in all seriousness, I am truly honored to be here. And, I'd also like to take a moment to recognize Hassan Elmi again for his many years of dedication to the credit union. As Cynthia mentioned, Hassan has been with the credit union for over 3 decades, and during that time, he has consistently demonstrated a commitment to providing the best possible service to our members. It's a pleasure to work alongside with him for the next 30 days, and I know he's going to be greatly missed when he retires at the end of the month. I personally am very honored to be the new Chief Executive Officer of Utility District Credit Union and to have the opportunity to serve the East Bay MUD community. It's a real honor. With over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry, including time at both large commercial banks as well as credit unions, I'm excited to bring my skills and expertise to this role. As the new CEO, my primary focus will be on a commitment to providing our members with more products, more services, and options for banking, and to find new and innovative ways to serve our members and to help them achieve their financial goals. That is really what a credit union is about, helping its members, who are ultimately the shareholders of the organization. Everything that we do and every decision that I make will be aimed at serving our membership and growing our membership. And with your support and the support of the East Bay MUD community, I know we can continue to grow and thrive as an organization. So with that, I really want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm looking forward to working with each one of you and to help make this the absolute best credit union it can be.
Anthony, and signing them up to become members.
Well, that's in the personal email that's coming after this. Yeah, and we would really appreciate your patronage. Just one thing, so having come from I'm going to go a little off the cuff, having come from the large commercial banking world, next week all the big banks are going to be reporting earnings. And when they report those billions of dollars in earnings, I want you to remember that none of us that bank with those banks will be receiving any of it. It will be going to the shareholders, the Warren Buffetts of the world. God bless them. What I want to emphasize, and the reason I'm here after 20 years in big banking, okay, is that the folks that actually use the credit union as members are the shareholders. And yeah, we're not going to give you a stock certificate. What we're going to give you are better rates. We're going to give you better rates on savings. We're going to give you better rates on loans. And we're going to be able to provide more products and services as well as digital innovations. The only way we can do that is to engage the membership, engage the East Bay MUD. The more business that you do with us, the better it gets for everybody and the more we can provide. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in public comment is Yvette Rivera.
Thank you, Director Coleman. I will be speaking on item 10 later. I have 2 things I just wanted to cover. This morning I spoke at the HR meeting and I mentioned a janitor, Teresa. I misspoke when I called her by my friend's last name instead of her last name. And her name is Teresa Soto, and I mentioned this morning how she spoke to the board during negotiations and said how her pay range was lowered 20 years ago when buildings were taken offline, but her pay rate was never returned to the level it was prior. So that was one item. I just wanted to clear that up. The other thing is, Director Patterson, I appreciate your attempts to change the face of the board. I do know from speaking at these board meetings for the past 3 years, you have held the position of president, and so has Director McIntosh. Sometimes it takes more than just sitting at that seat to make changes here. So I really appreciate you being vocal about the situation. I do hope that you hold DEI to their feet to the fire to get the request that you have made several times on this board to have promotional opportunities for employees. The last thing I wanted to say is 2 employees at the district died within the past few weeks during Christmas holiday. Carlos Vasquez and Susan Rexon. I knew them both. Carlos retired a couple of years ago. Susan Rexon just left abruptly, and I was wondering why. I just want to say that she was a wonderful employee. She helped everybody. She made everybody look good, and she's going to be missed. I just wanted to acknowledge both of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. That concludes public comment unless somebody's online. Thank you.
Yes.
Now we're going to go to the consent calendar. The items are 1 through 6. If any board member would like to pull an item, can you let me know?
Move items 1 through 6.
Moved by Director McIntosh. Is there a second?
Second.
By Director Patterson. Any comments or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes on a 7-0 vote. Thank you. Now we're going to go on to termination and discussion and items, if anyone wants to comment on items in 7.7 through 8, this will be important. I know that we have another speaker on item 7, and so would you prefer, Joey, to speak before the presentation or after? Okay. So this is now item 7 that we're on, which is the appointment manager for employee relations. And Director Clifford, what would you like to say?
Sure. Thank you. So I'm pleased to bring to you for your consideration the appointment of Adam Smyer as our Manager of Employee Relations. Adam has been with the district for 6 years as our Senior Human Resources Analyst working on employee and labor relations matters. I've also had the pleasure of working with Adam on challenging issues and during contract negotiations. Before Adam joined the district, he was a practicing attorney for 25 years, including 21 years working with the California judicial court system, and most recently as the general counsel for the Alameda County Superior Court, where he supervised a staff of 40. I would also note that Adam is an accomplished author. Adam has a bachelor's of arts degree in political science from Rutgers University and a law degree from New York University of Law.
Thank you. Joey, would you like to speak now?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, President Coleman, board, staff. I have worked with 4 different managers of employee relations in my years of being here. I've managed to get along with most of them just about all the time. Of course, there were differences of opinion from time to time. Now I get a chance to work with Adam. I welcomed Adam when he first got here. I even bought and read his book and suggested to people that they get it because it's very well written. Worked with him on side things, not in an official capacity, but he helped me out a lot in working with staff. I wish you all the best, Adam. As president of 2019, we look forward to working with you to resolving whatever issues come forward. We trust in that your integrity will meet our integrity, and we will get the business of the district done with all the respect due to everyone around. Sound like a plan? All right. Congratulations.
Adam, it is. We'll take a vote now. Actually, we need a motion. I'm sorry. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
By Director Lenny and seconded by Director McIntosh. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It's approved on a 7-0 vote. And Adam, would you like to come up and acknowledge this or?
Yes. President Coleman, members of the board, General Manager Chan, good afternoon, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you, President Smith, for the kind words, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you in this new capacity. Never a dull moment at East Bay MUD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Yes.
You prefer Adam over Mark?
I do. I've gone by my middle name for decades.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's your book title?
knucklehead.
Is that autobiographical or?
Okay. Takes us on to item 8.
Sure. So next we have Kathy Villatella, our Manager of Legislative Affairs, and Eric Saperstein here to discuss with you our state and federal initiatives for 2023. Kathy?
Thank you, General Manager Chen, and you just get situated here.
Oh, while Kathy is setting up, I'd like to report that the Ledge HR Committee heard this presentation this morning, and we 3-0 moved to recommend these items.
Thank you.
To the full board.
Okay, so good afternoon, President Coleman and members of the board. It is a pleasure to be here, and I am looking forward to the coming year. So what I'm going to do today is present to you both the state and federal initiatives for consideration. I will start with the state, and then I will break, and Eric Saperstein will come up and give you his presentation on the goings-on in Congress. There's been quite a lot of activity. And then I'll come back and wrap up with the federal initiatives. And I will pause along the way if you have questions. So I want to set the stage first for the state initiatives. As you probably know, we are now starting the first year of a new 2-year session, 2023-24 and 24-25. It is an interesting time because we have a significant number of new members. We saw widespread redrawing of district lines, which resulted in some early retirements. And we saw members termed out. And so this year we're coming in with a freshman class that is new, that it represents about 30% of the overall legislature. It is a very diverse class. There are more women in this class historically, more Latinos, and also more LGBTQ members this year. The other factor, just as sort of in the background, is when they came back into session, they gavelled in a concurrent special session, which was at the request of the governor. Only the governor may request a special session, and it has to be singularly focused. And this one is focused on gas pricing and the oil industry profits. And so far, there have been no discussions on that, nor any bills introduced. So the other thing that is happening now, in fact, today, the governor released his proposed budget for the 2023-24 fiscal year. And that is important because it's the start of the budget season, and the budget, as you know, in the past, Marlene has probably reported, it has been an unusual budget season in the past because it's taken up the entire year of the legislative session. This time, we are now going into the year, into the budget cycle, with a deficit. So in stark contrast to last year, where we nearly had, at the end of the year, $100 billion, or projected $100 billion surplus, we're now starting out with a $22.4 billion deficit, according to the Governor's Department of Finance. The budget that's been proposed is $297 billion, which is just short of the budget that was approved last year, $300 billion. But unlike past budget deficits and shortfalls, this one is not a crisis, not yet. It is really what we're looking at as a situation that needs to be managed. And so there's going to be a lot of conversations that get underway about how to manage and overcome the shortfall, how to make it up. And that's going to focus in on what they authorized last year, whether or not they defer some of that spending, whether they pull some of it back. A lot of it was one-time general fund spending, and that was done with intent so that they had this flexibility. Or they may look at using the reserves. We have very healthy reserves thanks to the past surpluses. And there's actually enough money in the rainy day fund, oddly enough, $22.4 billion, that may make up for the shortfall. But depending on what the economic indicators suggest, they may want to hold some of that back if we do tip into a recession. So that's going to be a big focus and weigh into many of the priorities of the legislature. So As we move forward, I'm going to focus now on these 5 initiatives. There's still some big issues that the legislature and the administration want to work on. And we're bringing these forward to you because there's a nexus with our priorities. These are in no particular order of priority. We've just listed them alphabetically as they are in the document you have and as I'll walk through today. So the first one is climate change. They did a very big package of bills at the end of session on climate change and set some ambitious targets, trying to find ways to mitigate the impacts of climate change. There's more to do, and they'll continue to focus on mitigation and adaptation strategies, and including wildfire. So our initiative this year, unlike last, we've combined wildfire and climate. While they're complicated issues, we're following in the footsteps of the legislature and the actions that were taken in the budget, where there was a lot of activity in the climate budget to address wildfire. So they're combined here. The focal areas on climate change will be around, for us, in terms of our priorities, electrification of vehicle fleets, accelerating carbon capture as one of the areas, and grid reliability, ensuring that as we make this transition, we have a reliable grid and no disruption of service. There also may be a focus on the water energy nexus, as well as sea level rise. And that's important right now as we see this flooding that's happening along the coast as a result of these storms. That may draw their attention. On wildfire and forest resilience, we're going to continue to work and ensure alignment between the state and the federal policies. And last year in the budget, there was $1.3 billion to strengthen forest wildfire resilience and focus as well on funding economic stimulus activities in the forestry sector. So we will monitor the climate discussions where there's a direct nexus to our operations and our climate action plan and bring those back for board discussion and consideration as appropriate. We will also actively engage with the legislature on forest and wildfire issues, and we will bring back any legislation, again, for your consideration, including anything around tree mortality and topics related to the wildland-urban interface. So any questions on that one? Okay, I'm going to move on to customer assistance. So as you know, last year, the legislature, through the budget, took actions to support addressing the needs of Californians and low-income households that were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. There was $113 million in the budget, both state and federal dollars combined, that was to set up a low-income household water assistance program called LIWAP. Of that amount of money to date, that's on our current calculations, the district customers have received $310,000. Most of that program is administered locally and will remain to be seen whether they continue with that. But that was something that was accomplished last year. And as you know, there was also SB 222, which was the Senator Dodd bill, which sought to set up a permanent low-income water rate assistance program, but was ultimately vetoed by the governor. And we had a supportive amendment position on that bill. And there were still some outstanding issues we needed to address. Going forward, the legislature and the administration will probably continue to focus on this important issue. The tough nut to crack is how to come up with a funding source to pay for that program. So we will continue to actively engage in those discussions. We will also continue to promote and protect our own customer assistance program. And we will bring relevant proposals, legislative proposals, whether they are policy bills or in the budget, to the board for consideration. The other thing they may take up is looking at extending the protection in terms of water shutoffs for all customers. Currently, it only applies to customers served by water agencies that have 200 or more connections. And there's a placeholder bill that's been introduced by Senator Dodd that would lower that to 200 connections or fewer, so broadening the eligibility or the application of those protections. So any questions about the customer assistance initiative? Okay, moving on. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is our third initiative. We anticipate, given the diversity now in the legislature and the ongoing discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion, that they will focus broadly on this topic across policies. Efforts last year really sought to leverage existing funding to direct that funding to those communities in greatest need. So the disadvantaged communities and low-income communities. There were policy bills in that area that didn't advance. They may come back and try to do that again. The other area is on workforce transition. As we go through this transition to a green economy, I know this has come up in the past at this board. This will continue to be a conversation in the legislature and the administration on trying to identify those opportunities. There are some funds, there are some policy bills, but to date, unfortunately, they haven't recognized the needs and opportunities in the water and the wastewater sector. And we will continue to elevate that issue when the opportunity presents, and also through the associations we're beginning to take up workforce development as an area of need. So these are all topics we'll continue to work on and bring to you when there are bills for your consideration.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
DEI? I'm all for what's here. What I don't see is a commitment to address and support legislation that attacks systemic racism.
That we do not have anything in that space right now, but that is something we can certainly look into. There have been, I know, with some new members who have come in who have raised that as an issue that they want to address, and we can monitor for those issues, and I can bring those back to the board for your consideration.
I mean,
and to
things that
discuss
I
those.
think of are like ban the box, it's, you know, especially how some of the housing issues that intersect with water, and of course the environmental justice issues. But I just think it's great to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I think we kind of buzz it together. And equity is about confronting racism, and we kind of leave that out. So I'd like to see us add that in.
Okay, thank you, Director Young. We will make note of that and come back with you as we identify those policy bills and bring them back to the board for consideration.
Director Patterson?
I just wanted to remind you, and you probably know this as well in the transference, but currently we're caught in a situation where we have ever-changing elements of our community and our makeup, especially when it comes to DEI and the former topic we talked about with our customer assistance program, because they keep rolling over. And as we work with these to help the people who are caught in this, there's two levels. When you talk about staff, it's how to get them up. And when you talk about outside coming in, it's how to bring them in to fill the voids in a way that keeps D&I on top. On the other hand, with the people who are struggling, and we provide more assistance to people for longer times than any other water district in the nation, and have a history with it. We got to make sure that this funding that comes down doesn't terminate and is there to put some money into the program that stays in the program and doesn't have to go back. You see, you can't really get people out of trouble who are in trouble without them addressing how they got in trouble and how they need to plan so that they don't fall back into the same chasm. And at the same time, we have people who are in housing but being pushed out. And what things come first? Early intervention with them so that they don't get pushed out and have to work their way back in. these are things that we need funding for. And if you keep in mind, the president had set aside monies that are already committed in the federal government that are available. They're not in the new budget, they're in the old budget. And priorities that say we will address the environmental justice issues before we go forward. We've got to identify that and make sure we line up together and continue to remind them a large agency like us is ready to go because we're already dealing with the problem. They need to start with us to get a bigger bang for the buck and more help for the people who need it, and continue to address the others as they come to fruition as far as how they're developed and whatnot. That's part of what I did working with the President's Advisory Council. These are issues that I put up before them to let them know. And that's the direction in which they're going. We want to sustain that. And I just pointed out to you.
Director Patterson, thank you very much for those comments. I would agree strongly. I think as a newcomer to East Bay Municipal Utility District, this district is a leader in addressing these issues and your customer assistance program. And I think we want to ensure that maintains and that we enhance it with these other programs. And when I turn to the federal initiatives, I will talk some about that. There's a tremendous amount of money for investment in infrastructure, but also to address these equity issues you described. And there's the Federal Justice 40 initiative, which is trying to take this on. It's a moment in time and a very important moment, and there's a lot of opportunity. So I appreciate your comments, and we will keep an eye out for those things and bring them back to the board for discussion.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I guess we go on to, I'm sorry, Director, Vice President Katz.
Yeah, I was going to hold all comments until we go through the 5 states, but I would be glad to just join in the conversation and just share some thoughts and comments. I think one theme that I gather from where we can take a lot of these initiatives we have seen before as a board, we've supported them enthusiastically before, and the descriptions are very robust updates that I think make sure that we understand the context about how these same themes are affecting us right now, and your outlook, your recommendations for how we approach them in this moment. And the descriptions make a lot of sense to me, and I appreciate that information. And I think where we can take things further really include, I think the general idea is that we are, especially when it comes to DEI and equity, we are downstream of many of the things that are happening upstream in society. And there are things that we experience in terms of customer assistance where the root cause is happening upstream of us. We are the utility that's dealing with the unpaid bill, but there really are a lot of other root causes that affect the customer who falls into arrears and needs assistance. We lack customer assistance frontline staff who have social services background and expertise. And nor am I recommending that we seek to train our staff to that level of support, because those services are really best administered through the county and through other nonprofit providers. And though that may be interesting if we do have some recognition that we hear from our staff about competencies that they would like to develop, that would be interesting. But in terms of what I'm really expressing here is that we can show up in the budget process and in some policy committee contexts, not to detract from the core work of our initiatives, but I think showing up for those upstream root causes is important, because showing that these issues come up when it comes down to the kind of utility make its bills? Can a utility function well? And showing how important these issues of social distress are. I think that's one way that we can improve and carry these issues forward. I'd be interested in feedback about more and presenting the board with opportunities to weigh in on those sorts of upstream support opportunities when it comes up. I think it's particularly helpful given that the Senate Budget Chair is the senator who represents most of our service area as well. Another perspective I have, I'm glad to see workforce development very specifically written into the write-up on climate change. And workforce is also a theme in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Specifically to climate change, as I've said in previous years, I think that our role is really important on workforce transition as we look towards resilience beyond a fossil fuel economy, because we are the largest retail utility in Northern California, and we may be one of we may also be the largest retail utility that's a standalone agency and can be really focused on workforce needs that have transferable skills from some of the fossil fuel intensive industries, we should be anticipating the need statewide to have a transition that happens, with resources that are far beyond what we can mobilize. But we should be thinking about what are the technical aspects that really, are meaningful to an agency that's actually operating. That the civil service rules, the practical timeline that it takes to do infrastructure planning, the identification of skills mapping, so that the administration agencies, that are considering these issues in the Labor and Workforce Development Agency and in committees of the legislature, that we can assist those bodies with plans. And because they may not appreciate that what it really means to run local government, what it means to do hiring within our framework, what it means to, we should help with those conversations. I don't think we're going to come up with the ideas all by ourselves, but I think active participation in those conversations so that there's a resource of information available, I think can be very important for making this something that is accessible to decision makers that would like to have these issues considered in a way where we iron out the details in a smooth way. So there's many other aspects that I'm not mentioning because there's a lot of conversations to be had, but I am pointing out that the importance of participating in that stream of work.
Thank you, Director Katz. We appreciate the feedback, and we will certainly look at, on your first point, where there's a nexus for those sort of upstream policy issues and budget opportunities that you mentioned, and keep an eye out for those and bring them back for some consideration when it's appropriate. And then also we will look at this issue that you're bringing up as well about workforce development and sort of how do we have a seat at the table and share our experience that you're describing. So that is the intent.
Thank you, Vice President Katz. A lot of these issues actually were dealt with in Ledge HR this morning. You gave Lisa's report to a large extent, but Doug?
Yeah, I just wanted to, since we're making comments, we go along, which is I think it's a good idea anyway. We have not recently had our own sponsor our own legislation. I don't know if are we considering that at all, or?
Yeah, sorry, Director Lenny, I should have said that at the beginning. We are not recommending proposing legislation this year. Coming on board, being new here, I would really like to have an opportunity to kind of get up to speed and understand the agency and the district and your priorities, and then see where there are opportunities, particularly with the new legislature. Now, that being said, it's an opportunity at the beginning of a session, but you can also do it in the second year. So I sort of begged, the board's indulgence to let me have some time, and then we can come back with what we might think or might be some opportunities for us to sponsor bills.
All right. I'd like to suggest one in any case, should the opportunity, I mean, of these areas, I think that we perhaps have the most to contribute in the customer assistance area. And we seem to kind of run into these issues where they sponsor a piece of legislation, we kind of support it, but there's, certain things that we don't like there. And so my thinking is maybe if we were the ones who were drafting it in the first place, we've had a lot of experience with it. We have been a leader in this area, that it might be something that we would consider sponsoring legislation for.
Yeah, I appreciate that. In fact, I'd been having conversations about this issue and where I think this is an important issue for the agencies to take some ownership of and lead on, and certainly this agency is one. I'm also, and you'll get to know me, I am really in favor of partnerships. And so I don't want to get out ahead of the environmental groups, the environmental justice groups who have been the leaders on this issue. So I would caution us to approach this carefully and think about that and think about maybe we really become partners and work with them, and if we can get to a place, find those opportunities and bring them back to the board for discussion. I wouldn't want to do it independently.
Sounds good.
Yeah, having some sort of close familiarity with at least one of those organizations, that I do think that there is an opportunity to advance partnership and to be proactive and instead of reactive to the discussions, and it would be unusual to say the least, but not unprecedented, and I think could provide a welcome opportunity to move through the impasse that's faced us on this issue for several years now.
Yeah, I think that is something we can continue to look at as these discussions move forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to keep moving us through. This is a very good conversation. The fourth initiative is water quality. As you know, this has been an ongoing priority for the legislature and many of the interest groups. Last year, the focus was on PFAS source control and information gathering, and we had positions on bills related to both of those. We expect this will continue, and hopefully they'll start to shift towards sort of a better, more strategic approach where we can better understand what are the sources and how to address issues around producer responsibility. The other issue that is new this year, it's a result, I think, of some of the media attention and what happened this summer with the harmful algal blooms and the fish die-off in the Bay Area is nutrients. So we are hearing topics of discussion around this. Whether or not, what was the actual cause, it's a complicated issue. I think this will come before the legislature and the administration and the regional board, and so we will continue to engage on that issue, be part of those discussions, and if there are any policy bills, bring those before the board. And lastly, on water supply reliability, this is a continuing initiative that always comes before the board, I understand. Whether or not, we're going to be in a drought condition this summer, we don't know. California hydrology is a lesson in paradox. So we're in a drought condition currently, and we're dealing with major floods. So there will be conversations, I think, regardless of the water supply condition, about looking forward. This administration is very serious about that. They issued their water supply strategy this summer, and that laid out sort of 4 areas: more storage, new sources, things like recycled water, reusing treated wastewater, stormwater capture, and then also water rights modernization. So where there's a nexus to the district's operations and priorities really is around new supplies. So we will look at issues like recycled water. We had a discussion about stormwater capture this morning in the committee meeting, as well as water rights modernization. So those are things we'll focus on. And then, of course, the State Water Board's water quality control plan updates the process is underway. We are signatory to the MOU. And so we will continue to monitor that. If there are any actions in the budget or any policy bills related to that, we will monitor those. And we will try to ensure that we maintain the reliability of our water supply. And we do know, and there's no bills or actions that do any harm to the McCollum fishery, which is very important and tied to our water supply reliability. And if there are, how do we mitigate those? So that will continue to be an area of focus for us in the coming year. So I think that wraps up the state initiatives.
Okay.
So
Before we go on, Director Young, you have a comment? or
Yeah,
question?
on the water, again, I'm limiting my comments, but on the algal bloom and nutrient question, I mean, I think we've had, I would say that we've had a bit of a strategy of saying it's really complicated and it's not, we're doing the best we can and it's not really us. I'd like to see us changing our presence on that issue, as we know we contribute to the problem. It's serious, and we better get everybody, damn well better get everybody at the table to figure out what we can do about it. And that goes way upstream, obviously, but you know, it also goes to you know, other issues, and it will continue to you know, flourish and happen as climate change and warming continues. So I think I'm just, you know, urging us to have a re-examination of our stance, which has been around avoiding expensive infrastructure investments by doing something else, and instead say, you know, this is a big problem. It's a big, expensive problem, and we need everybody at the table to, you know, address and recognize that the, you know, the solutions are, you know, complicated, and let's get at it instead of using the science to keep pushing us down the road. Because I know science is definitely an issue, but and understanding the science, but that's the same argument that's been used about not doing anything on climate change for the last 35 years. You know, so I'd just like to see that standing out, you know, a bit more.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments regarding the state? Bill?
I'd just like to echo on what she's saying. The advancement in our understanding and operational units of both climate change and those matters that affect water quality. You see, the water board has people, but they're not immersed in the problem. They're limiting and talking about funding or all of the elements on the side, but we're in the middle of it, and we've made those improvements. I think if we had not done our work with the salmon return, for example, the work we did and paving the way for them to get back by working in the river, you see, all the things that we did that eliminated some of the stuff that came in line that prevented them from getting successfully back. You see, those are things that the state doesn't know. And we need to have somebody, well, I don't know about somebody, but we need to have somebody saying, this is already proven. Let's enhance this and let this go forward, and it can be the guiding light for many other districts, many other rivers and streams and whatnot. They don't have the salmon return that we have, and they haven't put anything in the pot. They're coming to us for cold water storage for some of their fish because they don't have any place to put the fish that has cold water, see? They don't have the storage. Every time you line up, East Bay Mud is here, and most of the others are down here. And we've got to have a transmission of the knowledge and the accomplishment of our staff and our resources to help guide the way for others, you see. that we changed the fact that they wanted to limit our water supply at one point and how much water we were gonna get and limit the management of the in-stream that was going on that we've done successfully for almost 100 years. No pushback, no malfunction. And we got all the surrounding community in Umra and whatnot testifying to that. Well, that's our accomplishment, and that's why it makes us a leader, and that's why they should be more moving toward following some of the proven scientific and structural that we have already done and accomplished, and using that as a model going forward. I can't say enough about it. John knows how hard we worked. They don't even understand the problem they have with on our water, on our lands that we have, that we've done reforestation and whatnot in, and cleaning them up and whatnot. Just hauling the timbers and the old stuff out is expensive, and rather than addressing that with some state money to keep an area from ever burning, you see, they're arguing about other things that are less important, but we're demonstrating it. And I'm saying they need to come to where we say, direct some funds to do this. Our money's cover doing all of this. This is a little bit left over. Come on, state, get in the game. Play with us. Be on our team. That's what I'm trying to put forward, John.
Thank you, Bill. Director Chan,
Yeah, well, so.
you need to push the button.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, so on the heels of that, I was just wondering if you're working with any of our local state representatives, which ones you might be working with at this point, if any?
So, Director Chan, the district has had a long history of working with the delegation. And right now, for example, in the fall, Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, who, this was before my arrival on the scene, they did a tour with her in the in-district watershed, and so out in the hills. So we connect with them all the time, and now that they're coming back, we will be sitting down with them and having a conversation about what our priorities are and talking about sort of how we can be partners and advance some of those.
Yeah, I know that she's a strong advocate for East Bay MUD. I spoke to her briefly, but anyone else in the Bay Area delegation that were Alameda County delegation or Contra Costa?
Well,
County?
we've got some new members that have come in, but looking at our delegation right now, I would just say we have engaged actively, with Rebecca Bauer-Cahan. We have a new member who is Liz Ortega, who is Assembly District 20, which was previously Dr. Quirk's district. He was one of the individuals who retired early, and I know we've had a long-standing relationship with Dr. Quirk. On the Senate side, we've had conversations with Senator Glazers, Senator Skinner, who's very important as she chairs the Budget, Fiscal, and Review Committee on the Senate side. She's now also been appointed to serve on the Environmental Quality Committee, and I think maybe Governance. I'd have to go back and check. And then we have another new senator who took over from Senator Wajkowski, who termed out, and that is Senator Aisha Wahab. So all of these members, and there's others who, as well, Buffy Wicks, for example, she's very interested in housing issues. I don't know all of the history we have had there, but I'm on a steep learning curve. And so I really appreciate hearing some of this feedback for me, and we will start to establish more of these relationships. And if you have ideas of members that we should talk to and some of our related to the operations of East Bay MUD and our priorities, we welcome that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Along those lines, if somebody has a strong relationship with a member, whether it be in Sacramento or in DC, please let Catherine and Clifford know who they might be. So if an issue percolates, you may be called upon to actually go meet with them as a result of that.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, President Coleman. We do appreciate when you've had those conversations that gets back to us, just so we're aware.
Well, we have a policy that requires reporting of it, actually, I believe.
Thank you.
I just have a comment I made this morning, and it's going to be applicable both to the state and the federal, on the policies on 1, 4, and 5 on the state, 1, 3, and 4 on the feds. You talked about working together in partnerships. I think it's really important that we continue that effort. It's bode well for us in numerous JPAs, but when we start looking at legislation, we look at it a little bit broader than just our service area, whether it be on watershed, water quality, forestry issues, and use those partnerships in the JPAs to not just say, okay, this is McCollum only. You know, there's issues around the McCollum watershed that will impact the McCollum watershed. So you talked about partnership, that's great, and let's just look at it from a broad perspective on both the state and federal side.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I want to turn this over to Eric Saperstein to walk you through sort of an update on what's going on in Congress, and then I'll come back and quickly run through the federal initiatives.
Thank you, Kathy. First of all, good to be here in person. It seems like it's been 3 years, and it has been 3 years. And then I also want to just extend my congratulations to your newest board member, Director Chan. Welcome. And then the other thing off script, I didn't realize that Adam wrote a book about Washington politics. He's a knucklehead, I guess, says it all. Okay, so looking into, let's see if this works. Okay, so I thought I'd start off by speaking about where we are. It's a little bit of out with the old, in with the new. As Kathy mentioned, every new legislative session has 2 years. We start anew the same way in Washington. So I thought, this was a good way of introducing the discussion. Maybe after the last week of 15 votes for the speakership in the House of Representatives, it might be more along the lines what a difference a week makes. It was only less than 2.5, 3 weeks ago that we were still trying to finish up the last Congress. And now here we are with a new Congress, and much of what's happened towards the last few months of 2022 is just continuing into 2023. But we do have a formal process in Congress ready to move forward. Well, it's been delayed with the speakership battle with respect to organization and committee assignments. Probably by the middle of February at the latest, we'll know where all the suspects sit on the congressional committees in the House. The Senate is under control because with the Senate Democrats retaining control and expanding by 1 vote to a 51 to 49 vote in the Senate majority, they know who's going to be sitting on the committees. And I'll get into that in a second. I also want to say that the federal initiatives that Kathy will go through are aligned with the realities of what we're facing in Washington in this coming year to 2 year cycle. But I do also want to say that looking into the future, you have to be optimistic. I mean, the reality is it's going to be tough, but it was unbelievable when we look at the legislative accomplishments in a few seconds, what we got done in a very closely divided Congress in the last 2 years. So what I want to do is go through the legislative accomplishments, the election impacts, as they do have consequences, and then what this all means for the policy outlook for 2023, which the legislative initiatives take into account. So from a legislative accomplishment perspective, first of all, the 117th Congress of the last 2 years was historically significant. It was productive. You had the infrastructure bill becoming law, and what was once ridiculed as Infrastructure Week over, 6 to 10 years became reality. We had community project funding, otherwise known as earmarks, restored after a decade of no actions. The district did very well. I think that's a recognition of the district's stewardship on the issues of concern, that you were able to secure funding assistance. Not everybody got funding assistance, and the number of dollars that you received in your project requests were some of the highest in the categories that were requested and funded. I mentioned the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, trillions of dollars across the board for everything, but I think one thing I want to mention in that law, it's to speak to Director Young and Patterson specifically, and Katz's comments, is the fact that 40% of the benefits, not the money, but 40% of the benefits should go to disadvantaged, underserved communities. That is putting federal policy into the dollars, and so that's important. And then the Inflation Reduction Act, that was the otherwise known as reconciliation process, and that delivered trillions of dollars of new assistance for clean energy projects. Now that's still in the process of being put together. The Treasury Department, unlike past bills like where EPA or Department of Interior would run herd on this one, in this case, the Treasury Department is the agency that's going to direct how this funding is provided in tax credits and subsidies for clean energy projects. And then I would mention to you that the Water Resources Development Act of 2022 was passed. That's important, not so much because the Corps of Engineers gets its authorization for flood protection and navigation, but an onward effort to redirect the Corps of Engineers to focus on climate resiliency solutions, not just build a dam and move on, but to use dams to deal with sea level rise, to deal with extreme storm events through Corps of Engineers projects. And then finally, the omnibus spending bill, which does get back to the community projects, but we've got a spending bill just week or so before the end of 2022, which is really important because it has direct impacts going forward in 2023. And I'll get to that in a second. I also want to say, I may have heard some comments about money and where things are going. Thing about the infrastructure law, the thing about the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and even the omnibus spending bill, these dollars are baked in. Yes, there'll be attempts to claw back some money, but they're baked in. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you hear stories or watch the news and think about, is anything going to get done? The good news is the money's there, the policy is there. So people ask me, elections have impacts. They do. They have consequences. I got questions during the 15 votes of what is it like in Washington right now? And the only thing I could come up with, since this is being recorded, is have you ever seen a political demolition derby? That's what it was like. I mean, you really were spellbound by what was going on by just a handful of congressional members that basically make up the Freedom Caucus. But we know as a result of the 22 elections, the midterms, not only did the public reject the extremism that is in the Congress today is a function more about gerrymandering than it is ideological perspectives. I think you will look in the next several months and see that the moderates in the Republican Party are going to be asked to take some really tough votes. And I think you're going to see some splits along the way. The other thing to consider is the House Republican majority is only 4 votes. That's huge. Nancy Pelosi had the same votes margin. Nancy Pelosi was able to deliver her caucus every single time. That's not the way this conference, the Republican conference, is working. And so there are a lot of independent actors who feel they have no, shall we say, allegiance to the outcome, rather it's their agenda. So we're going to see what happens in the next several weeks. And looking forward, quite frankly, I think we're going to be seeing some very tough votes in budget, on the debt limit, and efforts to impose restrictions on abortion and things that don't directly impact the district. But you're going to see a lot of fights, and I think it's going to be inconclusive, partly because we have the United States Senate that is not going to accept a lot of this stuff that comes out of the House of Representatives. And I say that's definitively because the House is ruled by the gavel, and so if you have a majority, you can get things through the House. The Senate's a whole different kettle. I also would leave you with this one thought in the House of Representatives. Every Republican is now Joe Manchin. There is an ability to stop everything by just a couple of votes. So we'll see what happens. Some of the direct impacts in the House that have occurred, we have a rules package that has been adopted as of last night. Among many of the important decisions that were raised, it only takes one member in the Republican, or any member in the Congress to raise an objection to the speaker and make a motion to vacate the seat of the speaker rather than doing that fancy way. It's fire the speaker. So that's one thing.
Democrat or Republican,
Right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the Rules Committee. Now, this is getting into the weeds, but let me go. This is really important. The Rules Committee is the gatekeeper for all legislation getting to the House floor. The Speaker made an agreement to put 3 members of the Freedom Caucus on that committee. There are 9 members on that committee. What that tells you is you've got 3 hard votes, and then you've got some Democratic votes on the committee that could join those 3 hard votes to bollocks up legislative initiatives by the Republican majority. So, and then legislation wouldn't get to the House floor. So, or amendments would not get to the House floor to be in order. So there's that process piece. The other thing that came through in the rules is a decision to cut domestic spending by levels not seen since 2022. That's important because in 2022, that was when the first real increase in spending occurred under the Biden administration. So they're looking to cut spending. Again, the Senate's not going to accept this. So it's more messaging. And I think that's the theme I want to leave you with at the end of the day. A lot of what I'm saying is about messaging. We'll see how the results actually pan out. And then finally, the speaker's giving key committee chairmanships to folks that refer themselves with some admiration as firebrands. So I think you're going to see a very polarized committee structure. And this is all the good news, by the way. Turning to the Senate majority, as I mentioned, you've got 51 Senate Democrats in power. The reason this is important is the committee structure is now not evenly divided, but that the Democrats have 1 extra vote, and they can move legislation out of committee and then to the floor. So that's really important. And then finally, with the delegation for East Bay MUD, it's a little bit of back to the future. You've got all the same members, and now you have Representative John Garamendi coming back to your area as a direct representative. So you've got a good team of folks in place. I would say the only sort of piece of gossip is whether Kevin McCarthy follows through on his threats to pull Eric Swalwell off his Intelligence Committee and other committee posts as payback for moving Marjorie Taylor Greene and others off their committee assignments. Adam Schiff also will probably be a victim of that if McCarthy falls through, and I think that's probably a given. And then last, generational shifts in the House. It's very important to take note of this. You've got a record number of women now as members of Congress. I think there's about 150. You've got the first meteorologist who is now a member of Congress. And you talk about climate change. Well, now you got somebody who actually knows a little bit about it. And then the last thing is when you think about the generational shift, the average age of the leadership for the Democrats prior to Nancy Pelosi stepping down was about 80. With Hakeem Jeffries and Pete Aguilar from Southern California, and then Catherine Clark, who is the number 2 now in the House of Representatives from Massachusetts, your average age is about 50. And in the Republican side, your average age is around 50, 55 also. So take politics out of it for a second and just say the orientation or outlook of members is generationally shifted overnight. So that may have an impact too. And then the other thing is I just parenthetically mentioned that we have the youngest member of Congress ever. It used to be Eric Swalwell, but now he's geriatric. This fellow is from Florida. He's 27 years old. And one of the fun little facts about him is that when he came to D.C. to be sworn in, apparently he was unable to get an apartment to rent because he didn't have good enough credit references because he's so young. So life is full of unknown challenges. All right. Okay, so let's get on to very quickly the sort of policy outlook. As I said, you have to be an optimist. And these issues are just sort of top tier issues. I didn't put things like EJ issues into this because they are baked in and cooked into the infrastructure law, the administration's policies and objectives. They are not at risk, at least from this vantage point. So drought relief, sort of catch-all for climate resilience and drought water supply and what have you. I fully expect with Senator Feinstein in her last 2 years, we believe, in office, will continue to push to do some kind of lasting legacy water resources drought relief package. Clearly, Representative Jared Huffman in the House, who we sort of view as an honorary member of the East Bay Mud delegation for his commitment to fisheries and natural resources, will continue to fight the good fight to protect fisheries and investments in hatcheries and what have you. The fiscal year 24 budget, you know, I'm going to tell you that you're going to be able to submit, if you so decide, community project funding requests again. I also want to temper your expectations by telling you that it might be very, very difficult to get a final budget through this divided Congress, and that we would go through the next year as a continuing appropriations bill. But the good news for you is that your projects that have been funded will be considered ongoing projects, and you'll be able to work hopefully with the federal agencies or the state to get additional assistance. Reconciliation and debt limit. So reconciliation, as you probably recall, is the effort to basically impose fiscal discipline on the federal budget. The debt limit has to be raised, or we can't pay off the existing debt. My guess is that the Republican majority in the House has already made it clear that we're not going to accept an increase in the debt limit until such time as we get some agreements like cutting Social Security or cutting Medicare or any number of issues. I'm just using those as poster children, if you will. What I would say to you is, why does this matter to local government like yourself? Is if we were to default on the national obligation to pay off the debt, that would most likely trickle down, if you will, to local borrowings. The interest rates could conceivably go up because of the threat to the full faith and credit thought. So I think you just have to watch debt limit. That's going to be a big one. But at the end of the day, you know, hope springs eternal, and they'll cut a deal and increase the debt at the final hours. I just want to say briefly on PFAS. I heard it was mentioned earlier by Kathy, Superfund liability and imposing responsibility for cleanups on just anyone who contributed to a PFAS contamination will probably rise again as a legislative issue. And I'm not recommending that the district pursue any specific action. I just want to let you know that this is one of the top environmental issues that's going to be out there. And at some point, you may be asked by your trade associations to make some comments or association efforts. And then last, Build America, Buy America mandates. This is the mandate to require, if you accept any federal assistance going forward, just say from today, going forward from today, that you must buy made in America manufactured products, pumps, mixers, membranes, whatever it may be. There are exceptions and you can get waivers. But because a lot of the technology that you rely upon, particularly when you think about nutrient removals and what have you, isn't made in this country in readily available supply or at all. So what we're hoping is that there will be legislative technical corrections, if you will, in the next this session that would at least modify it to make it easier for public agencies to build their projects on time and within cost. So,
could I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Is that a bipartisan kind of issue, the Build America, Buy America sort of thing?
It is incredibly strongly bipartisan. Anecdotally, we had a conversation with one member who will remain nameless, and said, how's life treating you? And it said, very good, but we do have a problem with this Buy America mandate. Not that we're opposed to it, but for the reasons I just talked about. And the response from him was, yeah, we could have done a better way of establishing the process to make it a little easier to comply with. But it's really difficult right now to see a path forward for wholesale changes, but what we're hoping is that there'll be some kind of directives that EPA make it easier to waive it for, say, project specific or program specific. And we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's the big issue for us.
And it seems like on the chip side of things, there's money to fund more manufacturing capacity in the United States. What about for some of these other things? Is there any kind of incentives or anything for that other than, hey, you can get big government contracts if you make this in the United States?
Nope.
No.
No. In fact, what's really challenging for us in the water sector is the fact that the EV infrastructure sector was very, very successful in working with the White House and got a 2-year reprieve effectively through the Department of Transportation because there is not enough infrastructure built in this country for EV needs, charging systems or whatever. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But, we have been working, sort of leading a ad hoc coalition of trade associations, Aqua, CASA, AMWA, AWWA, all sort of alphabet letter water sector groups to try and push this with EPA and with the White House folks, the Office of their Infrastructure czar. The last thing I want to talk about, which is
recording in progress.
Whoops. Oh, this wasn't being recorded?
You could have said your stuff you wanted to say.
I could have been more, I don't know. Anyway, last thing I want to say, bright red oversight. This is going to be the one area where you're going to see fireworks in the House of Representatives. The Senate, not so much because it's Democratic control, and they'll be playing the sort of rear guard, protecting the president and the administration's priorities. But as of today, the first resolution of impeachment for the Secretary of Homeland Security was just introduced. We have, this is being recorded, right? Okay. We have the arsonist in charge of the Oversight Committee, and he will be basically holding a lot of very tough hearings on everything you can imagine, from abortion rights activists, abortion rights availability, federal role, all the way to regulation in the environment. I mean, it's going to be very, very messy. And that doesn't even get into the Hunter Biden investigations. So at this point, I'll just close by saying I've painted not a bleak, but not a very positive note. I just want to end by saying we will have opportunities. The fact that the administration is moving ahead, it has the money, it has the authorities, and it is committed to addressing the issues that are important for the district, that we're optimistic in the final analysis that we'll have something fun to report in another year's time. So with that,
Are there any
President
questions or
Coleman?
comments? Marguerite?
One question, I know in the, the air and climate GHG reduction space that the administration is shifting heavily towards, making sure that rules are being promulgated by EPA, that, sort of moving that, or hopefully moving those timelines ahead so that they can get this work done, over the next, 2 years. Are we seeing similar activity on the water side, in terms of, other rulemaking that was stalled during the Trump administration?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. One is the Waters of the United States rulemaking, which just is the rulemaking that just keeps on giving because there's so much controversy. The administration has put out its revised, as I think a week or two ago, its revised Waters of the United States rulemaking, which governs which water bodies are subject, which has nutrients and everything else, are subject to regulation under the Clean Water Act. Now, the Supreme Court has to take that up, much like it took up the Clean Air Act's authorities to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. But we're hopeful that this regulatory issue will continue to sort of resolve itself, and the Supreme Court won't reverse it completely, and we'll have some definitive statement on what is a water body for regulatory protection. And then on things like PFAS and what have you, the administration continues to pursue a priority, particularly on the wastewater side, for source control to minimize the costs to wastewater treatment agencies and say, look, industry, you need to get this stuff out of the effluent, get it out, treat it, and get rid of it. So I think those are two high priority issues. And then finally, I would just note going back to San Francisco Bay and what have you, that there is a significant amount of money that was appropriated for the National Estuary Program, including San Francisco Bay, and a specific call out in the appropriations bill that the San Francisco Bay Estuary Institute is to continue marching forward, working on its plans, revise them every 5 years, and make certain that they're doing things to improve the health of San Francisco Bay. And there's money in there for that.
Thank you, Eric. Doug?
I'm just curious, I know this is a legislative update, but are there any updates on administrative things with any of the agencies or anything that might be of interest to us? Any changes or?
So there's a couple of thoughts. One is the administration is on the sort of water supply side of life. The Bureau of Reclamation is trying to do its best to get as much money out as quickly as possible to promote water use efficiency, conservation efforts. The Corps of Engineers is working to leverage the inherent storage capacity of flood protection facilities. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is pushing very hard on making pre-disaster mitigation assistance more available. And then from sort of a broad brush on regulations, quite frankly, you look at some of the programs, like I mentioned, PFAS, you look at agricultural runoff and ways farmers can be supported to reduce non-point source loadings. Those are the sorts of things they're doing. And then finally, going back to the comments on low-income ratepayer assistance, the Department of Health and Human Services and EPA still have a boatload of money from the CARES Act that they have not obligated. And so we're hopeful that they will get the rules out and that money will be coming forward and that there'll be efforts to sort of stand up this program into the long term.
April, then Bill.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you really, thank you. Okay. I just want to clarify, how much money did we receive from earmarks last year? And also, what are you anticipating this year?
Okay, so in fiscal year 22, you received, I believe, 3.5, Kathy, I think? Yeah, it was 3.5, thereabouts, don't hold me to that number, but close enough for government work. So 3.5 for the Upper San Leandro project. And then you received 4.2 million this year, fiscal year 23, for the water recycling integrated program from courtesy of Barbara Lee's sponsorship.
I'm sorry, there's 3.5 and then you said another number?
Yeah, so there's give or take a few pennies, 3.5 million for Upper San Leandro, and then another 4.2 million to support water recycling, integrated water management work. But that second slug of money is from the budget that was just passed.
Okay.
Thank you. April, Bill.
First, let me thank you for all of the hard work you do on the national scene for us. I'm always taken aback when I hear some of your reporting out, but more impressive is how you keep us informed throughout the year. I know that it's an important thing to talk about climate change and to talk about some of the cleanups. We mentioned the Peace Superfund cleanup. We haven't finished cleaning up all the toxic sites we have in the country left over from World War II. And we have people who are exposed every day. We have some of those here in the Bay Area. And I'm just saying, as we look out, the appropriations that have been made and holding the feet to the fire to address those issues as we go forward is so important, because otherwise we see people it's another form of gentrification because we see people suddenly come up with something wrong. And by the time the medical gets through and finds out what it is, they're on the way out of here. Somehow, we've got to get them to address those issues more quickly, and particularly as it contaminates some of the good stuff we got going now, like our water, like intrusion on even our wastewater and what's in it, and what shouldn't be in it and ought to be controlled to be kept out of it. And that's where we need federal help. We need a lot of help in that area. I just shudder to think where we're going and where we think we're going and how that measures out. Because in California, in an effort to get down what we call the air contamination, we're not having that much success. I know the electronics are supposed to replace, but we're just not having that much success. And we've got to examine what we need to do differently to get there. Just preserving people is what I'm about. And whether it's the air or the soil or whatever it is that's coming in contact with what we're ingesting, including the water, these are areas that ought to be on the front burner all over the country. And I hope this Congress and everything that goes with it, the president's mandates, all those things get carried out. And if you can keep us connected so that when we come back to see you about our people here that we represent, we can give them a fair representation and see if we can't carve out some of the protections and some of the intended positive that are supposed to come from the federal mandate. And so it doesn't end up being a push me down to another level that's ineffective. And I just say stay vigilant, keep us informed, and thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate you.
Thank you, those kind words. I would just quickly say in the interest of time that what you have going for you is an administration that is committed to using its enforcement authorities to help fence-line communities and what have you, to make certain that the federal dollars that are there create incentives to fix problems like you're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eric, I just said, Andy, go ahead.
Just a brief comment. You know, I think we have a lot of challenges that we really do need urgent action on. You know, dealing with climate change, more regional and local, the nutrient issues and the risks to the health of San Francisco Bay. These things really require a rapid investment of resources and an ally in the federal government, and it's unfortunate that we may not have that given the politics of the House as you've described. I think that the tide will turn again. You know, we have a presidential election year next year, and that could change the outlook as soon as 2025. We will see, but you know, it may be in a couple years, it may be in 4 or 6 or 8, but we will eventually be working with our delegation again in the majority. And so I would encourage, you know, as we coordinate our message with our peer agencies in the Bay Area, that we do think about what is our plan for nutrients, and that we have, you know, some kind of way of coordinating our communications with our neighboring agencies in our Bay Area delegation. In my understanding is that there is a lot of deference given to Representative Huffman on natural resources issues, and that we should be thinking about how do we have those conversations about the long term? Because I think this is not something that we need to have expected an earmark for a certain amount of treatment infrastructure. But when I think about the cost that it takes to actually protect San Francisco Bay from the combination of nutrients in a warming climate, it's very sobering what it does to our budget and what it would mean for our bills and charges, our rates and charges. So I hope that we can take the long view and think of a series of check-in as we go briefings, so that when we do have an opportunity, that we're ready.
Yeah, and I would just say, Director Katz, to take a page from what Kathy was saying, partnerships are critical. When problems are so large, like what you're talking about, and I think, the National Estuary Program was only created through a partnership of estuaries that were really concerned about their health. This was decades ago. So I agree with you, the costs are sobering, and partnership is one way to deal with the circumstances.
Are there any other similarly situated agencies in the country that have, a bay or a captive body of water with this sort of discharge and this chemical effect in? Yeah, I think it would be interesting to know, to be in touch with those other similarly situated communities, and that we're not alone, as we make that sort of request.
And you do have a friend in the form of Senator Padilla, not to take anything away from Senator Feinstein, but these types of issues are very important to him, and he sits on the Committee of Jurisdiction.
So, Eric, I have two quick questions. Are earmarks going to stay? Since last time when the Republicans took control, they got rid of earmarks, and they now control the House. Are they going to get rid of them in the House, do you think?
No. They took a vote, courtesy of Representative Tom McClintock, who tried to get rid of them, and the Republican conference voted 158 to, I think, 53 to say
Wow,
no,
good.
they're here. The reason you may not see earmarks is if they can't get an overall budget done.
Okay. And the second question, I didn't realize there are many moderate Republicans left in the House, and I understand the Freedom Caucus is at 30 or 40 people. Do you envision that what Republicans are left in the House will be working more closely with the Democrats on legislation and breaking apart from the other part of the Republican Party on critical issues?
Yeah, I started this by saying it's a demolition derby. I do believe that because of these hard votes that some of these moderate Republicans are going to have to take, that you can only walk that effort so many times before you say, hey, guess what? I'm getting just slammed by my editorial boards in my local papers or what have you. This is not what I signed up for. And I think you'll see, call it a little bit of fractionalization and creating unholy alliances between some of the two-party members.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, it's very great to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to work for you folks, and it's just great to see everybody in person. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Catherine, you're going to walk us through the last bit here?
Yes, I will bring us home. It's been a long conversation, so thank you very much. So with that backdrop, I thought Eric painted a very good picture of what are the realities right now in Congress. And so because of the historic investment that the 117th Congress made in infrastructure, I think that one of the big priorities is going to continue to be they're going to focus on the implementation of those dollars and how they're implemented. So that is something that we should continue to monitor. But let me walk you through just the 4 initiatives that we have again. Similarly to the state, they are aligned with where there's a nexus to our priorities and our operations. The first one is climate resiliency, and we've talked a lot about that today. Very similar issues, trying to advance and focus in on achieving some, I think, ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and get to a carbon neutral economy. So the focus, again, is going to be on mitigation measures, including building electrification, ways to reduce greenhouse gases, energy efficiency, heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles, and charging infrastructure. That's an issue that's definitely relevant and coming up along in the utility sector. We will continue to seek programmatic funding opportunities that are consistent with our operations and that we can support also our climate action plan through federal funding. Wildfire prevention and response, again, the bipartisan infrastructure law had funding in there to help with the implementation of the Forest Service Plan that came out last year, which was a 10-year plan on how to invest in sort of restoration, forestry restoration, and wildfire resilience. As they're implementing that plan, they have now identified 10 initial landscapes across the West where they're going to spend some of those dollars on projects. Unfortunately, it did not include the McCollumney at this point, but that's an opportunity for us to sort of have a seat at the table in those conversations about addressing the needs of the McCollumney and the larger, regions and associated watersheds or adjacent watersheds, and we will continue to sort of monitor those opportunities. There could also be an opportunity for additional, funding through appropriations that could be for those efforts as well as some of our in-district efforts that I talked about earlier. And then, again, the workforce transition issue, that's an issue that Congress has paid attention to. So there has also been, funding and support for federal grant assistance programs to help with sort of transitioning, and we want to bring to their attention the needs in the water and the wastewater sector. So on infrastructure and other funding, I think Eric really covered a lot of that and gave you sort of a historical overview of what has been accomplished, and we should look at what those opportunities are for programmatic funding and share that information with staff. But in addition, on the earmark issue he mentioned to you, and he had the numbers correct, the two earmarks that we got, one in 2022 and then in the 2023 spending plan. The one that we got, the $4.2 million for the East Bay Shore Emeryville Albany project, draws on an existing authorization that was in the Water Resources Development Act. And that is an opportunity for us to go back potentially to secure and pull on that authorization to secure additional money. So we will look at what those opportunities and bring those before you. In addition, Congress, through sort of these infrastructure investments, has had an interest in providing rate assistance for low-income water and wastewater customers. That could continue into 2023, and we will continue to actively engage in there. There's an opportunity. And then there was funding for the establishment, or authorized for the establishment, of a low-income, I mentioned the LIWAP program. There was the funding for that, which I mentioned earlier. But there was also in the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, established a rural and low-income customer assistance pilot program administered by EPA, but it did not include corresponding funding. So we are actually monitoring that to see whether or not there's an opportunity in this year to look at funding the implementation of that program. So we'll actively monitor those things and bring them back to you. Eric, again, he talked about water quality. The administration is implementing their 2021 PFAS roadmap. So some of the things he mentioned are related back to that. But this issue continues to come up about proposals to designate PFAS as a hazardous substance under Superfund. And there could be discussions in Congress, but again, we just don't think there's a likelihood of any bill moving in that regard, but we will continue to monitor for that. It has implications for wastewater operations in terms of the biosolids management, and that could have an impact. It can also create a PFAS liability for East Bay Municipal Utility District. So it's an important issue, and we will continue to track that. And we'll work on these issues, as Eric had mentioned, we have been working on these issues through the trade associations, and he named several of those. And then lastly, the fourth initiative, turning to water supply reliability and natural resources. This is an important area where there's a nexus with our water supply reliability and our operations and water supply. So we will continue to sort of monitor topics of direct relevance to the district, and that includes CVP operations, CVP allocations, drought response, fishery and habitat restoration projects, and any implementation, federal implementation of their part of the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan update. We will also continue our efforts to protect the McCollumney River supplies and look at, making sure that we can access, the water transfers and also our CVP contract supplies. So that's continuing to sort of focus in on protecting, our water quality supply in the project through the Freeport Regional Water Project. And then we will also continue to work on protecting the McCollum fishery, which is very important to the reliability of our supply. And if there are any projects or things that are put forward by the Bureau of Reclamation or others that could impact that fishery, or the operations of the projects that could impact the fishery, we will monitor for those and try to have a seat at the table to make sure that protections are in place where we mitigate any impacts. So that completes my quick overview of the federal initiatives, and I'm happy to take any questions.
John?
Yes, Lisa.
I would move the 5 state initiatives forward as well as the 4 federal initiatives. It's a motion.
Second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Doug Lenny. Any comment, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Passes by a 7-0 vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Takes us on to the next section on 9. David Briggs will lead us on the coronavirus update. Or is Clifford going to lead us on that?
I'll introduce the topic, but Dave
Okay.
will provide the information. So as the board recalls, last month we rescinded the COVID-19 emergency declaration that was in place since March of 2020. Since December, our COVID numbers have remained stable, and we're continuing to move forward with our COVID transition plan. So Dave Briggs is here to provide a brief COVID update.
Okay, thank you, Clifford. Happy New Year. Hello, President Coleman, and welcome and hello, Director Chan. So we are in the middle of our transition plan. We've taken a couple of steps already, and we've got a couple more to make. And just to follow through on that pledge to keep you informed and keep an eye on the data as we progress through the plan, just wanted to show you a little bit of data before we summarize where we are. So on this slide, just wanted to focus on the upper right with the positivity rate, which remains high. There is still virus in the community. There's no way around that. But the counterbalance to that is that the hospitals are doing well. They're not strained. The ICUs are not strained. So far, the strains that are circulating in the community are not particularly virulent. On the employee side, we have not had an employee with a severe case of COVID in I don't know how long, either inpatient or outpatient. We don't have any employees needing that level of care. And on the lower chart, you can see our positive cases at the district. For the past 2 months or so, we've been averaging about 2.5 cases a day. And we have had 20, not 17, but 20 cases in January. But I tell you, the last 7 days, we've averaged 1 case every 2 days. So it has really slowed down. And then I'll show you here with the leading data, the concentration in wastewater from our own West of Hills area, SD1 wastewater. You can see that there is a trend downward in the concentration in the wastewater. This is the leading indicator, so that sort of comports with the lower rates of employee cases that we've been seeing. Central San on the East Hills mostly, although certainly they have other parts of the service area, of their service area that doesn't include ours. A little bit elevated still, but by and large, things are stable, and our case rate is improving. So I think we feel comfortable progressing with our plan. And just to summarize where we are, the board rescinded the emergency last month. Yesterday, we opened the building. I went out to lunch today, and I got my card out to go into the doors when I was coming into the building, and they weren't locked. They were open. So I got thrown off there. But the building is open, and you experienced that today with some members of the public visiting you in person. We don't have a resolution for you to continue any virtual meetings. We will transition to the regular telework plan that we've adopted and shared with employees beginning next week. Actually, the 16th is a holiday, so it'll be the 17th. And we will look forward to taking the face coverings off as a requirement. Of course, I'm sure many people will still wear them indoors, but it won't be required after January 30th. So that's where we are. I think we're in good shape so far. Thank you.
Are there any questions for David? Andy and then Lisa.
I'm looking at the concentration chart, in our district, and it's, just interesting to see the inconsistencies with the positivity rate for the county, for Alameda County, and the differences with Central San. So I hope that we are sharing the data that we have about I&I activity, because that's a unique issue that really affects our samples at our plant, and that we're sharing with all of the scientists that are analyzing our samples, the data that we have on I&I, because I think it's critical that the public health scientists understand what's happening with our source so that they can control conclusions that happen. Of course, these are the concentrations, but the concentrations mean a very different thing during wet weather events, I imagine. So yes.
I think they are adjusted for I&I and wet weather.
Oh, in this chart that we have here?
I'm going to get Amit to make that. Do I have it right?
Amit Matsudi, Director of Wastewater. I believe the samples are collected from concentrated sludge, so it doesn't really change the characteristics on the higher inflow because it's a settled sludge that is in the primary.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Yeah, I think I don't know the science on that, but that I look at it and I don't have another explanation for why we would have a different wastewater concentration compared to two other sources of data. So I think it still is, I'm very glad that we've thought about this problem and that we're collecting a sample from a concentrated area. So let's just see what we keep seeing in data and share as much data as we can share. Thank you. The other comment I would like to make is, as you know, if it still is indicated that we should remove the requirement for face coverings, and I still have some reservations, you know, just because the things are, you know, still changing, and I don't think we have a long-term model for what does you know what does a reoccurring epidemic, you know, look like, you know, where we have something that we see, you know, different alternating phases of, you know, endemic and epidemic. What does that look like, and how do we respond? At least, you know, for ensuring a safe environment for everybody through the face covering mechanism. I'm interested in seeing what are the best practices for strongly encouraged, because that's, I think, essential if we're going to be removing the requirement that we look at what are the best practices for that. It usually involves making high-quality masks available at visible sites, like where people might, you know, come in at security, or at other, or maybe where you first enter the building. So those providing the mask seems to be an important way of setting norms. I think thinking about different settings in different ways, you know, a private office or a low-density office could be very different than where you have large gatherings that are not intended for eating. So I think context matters. So I hope that we can think through what does strongly encouraged mean, and if we're still seeing case numbers settling, and you know, and that official date is pushed out a little bit while we're figuring out those plans, I don't think we need to, you know, stay attached to a date. I also am not aware of, you know, what if we've had conversations with our employee bargaining units yet, and would be interested in making sure that our conversations are done in coordination with listening to their interests too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mike was just simple. What about the parking garage? I noticed it was still, we needed our badge this morning.
To get in, to come in and park?
Right.
Yes, so that will always, during some portions of the day, we do have the gate open, like at the very beginning when there's a rush, and at the end of the day when there's a rush, so the gate doesn't wear out. But probably in the middle part of the day when you arrived, the gate will be shut, so you'll need your badge to get in.
But that was like a little before 9 this morning.
I think we keep the gate open probably till about 8:30.
Okay, all right.
Okay, anything else on coronavirus?
David, you're up again. Don't leave. You're gonna tell us.
The drought is diminishing, and we have a lot of water and snow, and We're going to be spilling water and everything else?
Yeah, so we definitely received near records amount of rain, and that storm door still remains open. Just quickly, during the most intense periods on December 31st, Oakland received nearly 5 inches of rain, and we saw about 655 million gallons per day system-wide come into the wastewater system. That's 600 million gallons per day more than our average dry weather flows. These storms have also refilled our local and upcountry reservoirs to a certain extent. And so, as you noted, Dave is here to provide an update on, as we normally do at the beginning of the year, our last year's water supply update, just a summary, talk about the current storms and our forecast for the water year 2023. So, Dave?
Okay, thank you, Clifford. What Clifford was just describing that we've seen in the last month in water year 2023 is going to look that much better because the first part of this presentation will summarize 2022, which wasn't so good. So last water year, which ended on September 30th, we were by and large dry, upcountry, in all metrics that we look at. Upcountry, snowpack, East Bay precipitation were all in the below normal to dry category. Unimpaired runoff was in the dry category, as depicted by our joint settlement agreement, JSA flows on the river, on the McKellamie. We did end up, storage has been, as we've reported many times, over 500,000 acre feet, primarily because, well, there are two reasons. One is that we imported, purchased, and diverted almost 54,000 acre feet of supplemental water through the Freeport project. That was done in 3 separate operations of going off and on, not an easy thing, but that nearly 54,000 acre feet of purchased water was made up of Bureau of Reclamation CVP supply, augmented by 2,000 acre feet that we got from Contra Costa Water District, as well as 20,000 acre feet from Placer County. So we did end up at 520,000 acre feet of carryover storage as we entered this water year. A lot of it was due to the fact that it was slightly wetter than the prior water year, 2021, but also with a nice help from the purchased water. So we entered 2023, and before we get to the hydrology, just wanted to show you our water production numbers. They're very low. We're already still getting the benefits of the conservation campaign. It turned very wet recently. We started seeing some record low production values around Christmas and New Year's, down to 115 MGD, which is very, very low for our service area. I'll get to more conservation and numbers in a moment, but oh, here they are. Okay, already. So here we're summarizing. On the top is the first 6 months comparison between 2022 and our base year, which was 2020. And in the bottom sets of numbers there are the second 6 months. You can see that compared to 2020, we were very close as we got to April when the board declared a stage 2 drought. The campaigns began for conservation thanks to Andrew's group and Kelly's group. You can see that the second 6 months comparison between 22 and 20 are quite significant. It's also very dry in that first period of 2022 as well, so that didn't help. We're still tracking below, even in January, we're still tracking a little bit below the 2020 baseline even right now. But we finished the year 9.3% below, a little bit below our adopted target, but still very impressive. I mean, our numbers were already low, and we went almost 10% below those low numbers. Okay, so these numbers are through midnight on Sunday, so very late Sunday night. And we've already received about 2 inches more than that, and we have more in the forecast. So let me see if I can get you, we're at 37 inches right now. And you probably heard the thunderstorm roll through around lunchtime that's headed right to the McKellamie watershed. It's raining and snowing right now. But we're at 37 inches up there, so we're well above average. We're probably already had average precipitation for January, and there's another 4 inches in the 10-day forecast. Similar here for East Bay. up to date, we are probably, we're about 20 and a half right now as of noon on Tuesday, with another 4 inches to come. The snowpack for this water year, 2023, is shown in red. That's over 100 and climbing as we're speaking right now. And it's tracking the wettest year we've ever had, which is shown in green, 2017. Well above average, well above last year, where we saw a great start in 22 and then nothing for several months, and then we got a couple storms late in the winter, early spring. But yeah, things are looking very good on the snowpack. The numbers are 200% of normal. Those are actually even higher. This data is several days old. It's even higher right now. So things are looking very good. Storage-wise, we're at 641,000 acre-feet. The river is flowing very highly right now. We have not had this much storage since 2019. And we have been releasing, we are releasing 3,500 CFS from Comanche right now. We have a great control of the, we are encroached about 20,000 acre-feet, but we've got 150,000 acre-feet of encroachment space, so we are well on top of things. We're managing that very proactively. And I'll get to the storage forecast on the last slide. But yeah, we have a controlled release from Comanche. We have been on the spillway at Pardee off and on for the past couple weeks. We have some flow over the spillway at USL, upper San Leandro Reservoir, and some releases into San Leandro Creek, and we made a few releases into San Pablo Creek as well. So we are very full, very wet, and managing everything very proactively and making sure we have all the downstream notifications to make sure no one's caught off guard. Right now, 3,500.
And where does it start becoming a problem for the downstream folks, particularly?
We're in the lower end of high, I would say. And so with enough proactive communication, I would say there's no problem downstream. We have permitted capacity up to 5,000.
Permitted up to 5,000, does that mean, yeah, what does that mean exactly? I mean, because there's flooding and then there's damaged flooding, right? Or there's unexpected flooding or hope for not flooding.
For our Corps of Engineers permit, we're permitted to 5,000 CFS release. The floodplain below Comanche is used in some capacities and will get inundated at that level, but you know, they're in the floodplain, and that's well known.
Okay.
We haven't heard any, I have not heard of any complaints, a lot of questions, but I have not heard of any complaints or concerns with the releases that we're making out of all of our dams right now.
Out to the flood plains, that's also recharging the...
To some extent, yes.
To some extent.
It's still within, it's not going all over the place, but obviously the river has room to expand a little bit when you get below Comanche.
Oh, okay. And where's the danger zone? Above 5,000 or?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Clifford gave you a few impressive numbers. The storm that rolled through after Christmas, shown here, over 17 inches in the McKelmy. That's a lot. 12 inches in the East Bay. We set a record for one day in Oakland. Same day, San Francisco had the second highest they'd ever seen in a 24-hour period, and very high flows on the McKelmy. The picture on the right is looking downstream of the dam, with the flow being contributed from the spillway off on the left. Just a little bit more fine-tuning of the storm on looking at a couple of days when it was at its most intense. We saw rainfall rates in the East Bay that were almost a half an inch an hour, which is extraordinarily high. And you can see with the graphic on the right, that storm, if you can see it clearly enough, the reds and the pinks and the whites are more intense precipitation. There is a very intense spot indicated right around the upper San Leandro watershed and the East Bay. A lot of intensity in the central Sierra. That first storm that rolled through really pointed directly at the central Sierra. Very fortunate for us. So just the last slide with numbers on it depicting the storm. We saw a substantial increase in our reservoirs. Pardee rose 10 feet. USL rose 9 feet in 24 hours. It rose 16 feet in about 8 days. So we went, leading into Christmas, we were looking up at a 75,000 acre foot hole before we even got the flood control level. And within 2 weeks, we're encroached 20,000 feet. So we really did see a dramatic change in just a couple of weeks.
Like now in terms of being able to sell it. Obviously, we're generating a lot more than
we're generating as much as we can.
Yeah.
But our releases are exceeding our generation capacity. Luckily, we have a lot in the watershed, so we're going to be generating for a very, very long time. We do have 1 unit out at Pardee, but we'll hopefully get that back in about 2 weeks. But the price of wholesale energy is very, very high right now because of natural gas, and we're seeing a very big benefit from that. Just briefly, just statewide, again, the Central Sierra has benefited. Strangely, Northern California is seeing the least amount. The storm that's rolling through now and the one that rolled through over the weekend preferentially targeted the Southern and Central Sierra. It's headed for the Colorado Basin next, and I talked to the Colorado River manager from Met a couple of days ago, and for the first time in I don't know how many years, they're actually looking at an above normal year, which is, I'm sorry?
Years.
Yeah, so that is, even though we don't directly get involved with Colorado issues from a statewide perspective, that is very good news for California. Okay, last couple slides. So this is already out of date. We're at, I think I said 37 inches right now in the McKelvey. We're looking very, very good to, under almost a worst case scenario, just being average this year. In terms of the precipitation, and this is my last slide and probably I think my most important one. It shows our storage where we are right now. It's a little low. It's already 7,000 acre feet too low. We anticipate being in flood control mode here for several months and then letting the snowpack basically fill the entire system up there. And you can see the gold line is the 99% exceedance. And that's what that is showing you is we may not quite fill the system in July, but we will almost certainly have full carryover storage when we go into the next water year.
So what happened last year happens this year, we're okay.
If I factor in what, this is 2 days old, okay, if I factor in what we've just seen in the last 2 days, if I factor in that there's a high probability that we're going to probably see 3 or 4 more inches because that's in the near-term forecast, and then the spigot just gets turned off, we will be above 600,000 acre feet on September 30th. Cool. And that's, yeah, that you can't get much more of a worse situation than that.
That leads to one question. I know we have a contractual right with Yuba Water, so we're not going to need to exercise it, do you think, in 2023?
Yeah, we're not going to, currently, we won't need any of that water.
So that water that we have paid for the contractual right to have first right of refusal, are we able to wheel it to somebody else?
Mike, do you know?
We did not pay for any of the actual water. We paid for the environmental work and the planning for a 3-year transfer agreement. So it's not just 23, but it's also 24 and 25. Okay. What we're hearing from Yuba is that in all likelihood, because of how wet their system has also been, they will not have water to sell in the spring or and they'll have limited water in the summer by the nature of how their releases work and when they have transfer water available. So they're unlikely to have water available to sell this year, and we're obviously not going to have a need to purchase any of that water.
Okay. Thank you. Andy, I saw your hand up.
Yes, it's uncharted territory for us because, of the sudden amount of rainfall coming right after a drought year. I normally wouldn't think that we would make, decisions about, drought status until, we file the availability and deficiency report, but, and I'm not really coming to a decision or recommendation now. We also have to think about messaging at the state level and, you know, our regional messaging considerations. But, you know, we do have restrictions, you know, that are in line with our drought declaration. We have penalties associated with our stage 2. And I think it's important that when, you know, questions are asked, that we be able to, you know, assert and insist accurately that they're warranted. You know, when there's a realistic possibility that we still need to save every drop, we need to reserve that. This is so unusual, and it's good news. So I'm just saying that so that we can consider something when it's appropriate.
Yeah, so I have looked back at the past droughts and the actions the board has taken, and, you know, we've had, you know, some similar situations in the early 90s, that 6-year drought. And the board did take earlier action. So in 93, they went from mandatory to voluntary in early March. The first board meeting in March, and then, you know, subsequently ended the voluntary 10% rationing at the time. So we'll continue to track the water supply situation, but, you know, depending on circumstances, it may be a situation where we take that first step from mandatory to voluntary, and then back in April bring the water supply availability and deficiency report. But that's the only other time where I found a similar situation where we went from drought to a deluge.
I think that type of incremental approach makes sense, and I don't think it's a matter of the calendar so much as it is the math and statistics. You know, the graph on slide 17 is my favorite slide. You know, the whole presentation is really excellent. Thank you, but it sums up where we are and has an objective way of analyzing things. So I just wanted to make sure that we were paying attention to those policy issues.
Thank you very much, David. That moves us on to now the 6-month forecast for board committees and workshop agendas. Clifford, are you going to discuss it, or?
No, it's just attached for your
Okay.
reference. We have the forecast, we have the Interdepartmental Committee annual reports, which is required by our policies, and the monthly report, and certainly can answer any questions the board may have. But you will see in the forecast that we have a number of workshops coming up. This is a budget year, so we have the first budget workshop at the next board meeting, then we have our customer assistance program workshop after, then we have our water supply, long-term water supply workshop, and then the next budget workshop following, and then, you know, there may be a third one if needed. So we do have a number of workshops, which is why we're trying to space some of these out, the other regular committee updates.
I do have one question on the general manager's report of activity, which is, and it was in the news yesterday, day before yesterday, so it wouldn't have made it into the packet, but the Wood Street encampment, is there, does the court order have impact on our ability to make sure that our operations at the water treatment plant are, you know, safe and et cetera?
Yeah, so the Wood Street encampment, that area has been moved to.
Oh, so it's not directly impacting our.
Not directly impacting, but it's been moved actually towards, I think they're trying to build something more towards the front of our water treatment plant. So we've been in discussions, you know, as far as, you know, just sharing our concerns that if they do move and they, you know, and that's the location to pick, just make sure that it's safe and doesn't impact our operations. But Caltrans and others, Oakland clearly understands that because of the action they took at Wood Street.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So next is the 2022 Interdepartmental Committee annual reports. This is just for information?
It's for information.
Okay, thank you. Then that moves us on to the monthly report as a whole. If there are any questions?
If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer this.
Okay, thank you. We will now move to, and Yvette, I know you have a speaker card in. After Lisa gives her presentation on Ledge HR, we'll call you up. We now move to reports and director comments. And if anybody online to comment from items 10 through 12, please raise your hand when the item is up for discussion, and we will then call upon you. Are there any director's comments? Oh,
No.
no, that's after,
No.
I'm looking at the order here.
Committee reports almost always.
So you-
No.
The linear regime.
Okay, we'll do that. That's fine. I was just following what's on the sheet here. I haven't seen one of these in a while. Okay, we'll do the committee reports, planning, Director Young.
Yeah, thank you. Our mighty committee of two this morning, due to our board member changes, had 3 reports. We're supposed to have 3 reports, ended up just hearing 2. The Wildcat Pumping Plant negative declaration, which we approved, and then the quarry restoration site for our trench soils, and the environmental impact report, which we heard a number of public comments and concerns expressed, and instructed staff to hold off on release of that draft environmental impact report in order to go back and do more due diligence with elected officials in the city, in the areas that are impacted, as well as dialogue with community members. And the annual readiness update was deferred to our next meeting.
Thank you. Director McIntosh for
Yes.
LegHR.
The Legislative Human Resources Committee met this morning at 10 a.m. All members were present, Coleman, Patterson, and McIntosh. We had 2 items on the agenda, an update on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan. And the second item was the legislative update with an oral report. We had the state legislative initiatives for 2023, as well as the federal initiatives, and then an update on various miscellaneous issues of interest to East Bay MUD.
Thank you, Lisa. Yvette, you have public comment on the LegHR committee.
Thank you so much. Pretty quick, the board this morning, the HR committee mentioned that they were considering ending the monthly meetings and maybe going to every other month.
Oh, the update for the strategic.
Yes, update for the strategic plan. And I wanted to protest that. After the winners group report, quite a few people were very upset about it, including people on the board. And when the board heard about the district's plan, long-term plan, very long-term plan, I do recall Director McIntosh saying, you know, I want to hear updates every month.
Yeah,
And
sure.
When I heard this morning that that may stop, I was a little shocked. Given Director Patterson's passionate speech this morning about the face of the district, how could we have less transparency with this program?
And I'll talk about that with you offline.
Okay, great. And at those monthly meetings, we hear from union officers, employees, and me as a member of the public. And I guess that's it. I just, you know, I'm hoping that this doesn't get put on a back burner, and that we continue to hold Dairy's group's feet to the fire to implement programs that will hopefully affect change before the end of our lifetimes. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Yvette. We are now going to go on to Director, if you have future items for consideration, please submit them to the General Manager. And now we're going on to Director comments. Are there any comments from the board?
Lord Jesus, please no. Oh my God.
To express gratitude to staff. In the last board meeting, I addressed the staff on Paul Silas, a man who grew up under me from a child in elementary school. I just wanted to say, I wrote a letter to his wife and to his children and mailed it. We didn't do it in the name of the district, but time being so valuable and quickly toward the end of the year, I got that out of the way. I think going forward, what I've learned, and I've been invited Friday to McClymonds. There are two things taking place there at 5 p.m. on Friday. They're unfurling the banner with Bill Russell's number 6, which will stand in the gymnasium in perpetuity. And they've invited me to be part of that ceremony. They're also honoring Paul Silas, giving him an award. He too followed the footsteps of Bill. And my only comment about all of this is that it's a privilege to serve on this board. I get called on for lots of activity. There's an organization called the African American Water Foundation, the state body, and they have a meeting on Friday. I'm not going to that because I'm going to McClymonds. But it's a pleasure being able to assist with all these things around the state. I seem to have come into knowledge that's helpful to people. And I want to say to this board, I appreciate your tolerance of some of the things that come to me that I share with you because I'm a member of this board. But I assure you, in all my endeavors, I always try to push this board upward for not only its support, but for its achievements. So I just want to make sure you understand. And it is a pleasure to serve with all of you. Today has been an exceptional day. And I just say we take the next step forward in unity and continue to deliver. All of you have important things that you do in your districts and in your affiliated operations and your own employment and whatnot. So together we're going to be this team that's the driving force, bringing the staff and all of their accomplishments. But I always say I can't do anything without somebody else being part. And that's why I say I thank you to staff, I thank you to the board, everybody for your support, and sometimes your indulgence in my activity. Thank you.
Joey, you had put your hand up. You need to come up to the mic so it can be recorded.
We had an adjournment in memory request.
Well, I know.
Yeah, well, we have
We're not there yet.
several, actually.
Okay.
We have 2. Please come up.
Thank you. Just a reminder for the request to close in honor of, yes, you got it, Susan Rexon. And I think there were 3, but that was the one that I knew about right away. So.
Thank you, Joey.
Thank you.
Are there any other board member comments? In that case, we do have 2, we're going to close for, in memory of 2 people. One is Susan Rexon, who both Joey and Yvette mentioned earlier. Susan passed away on December 26 after the short but hard-fought battle with cancer. Susan was a valued district employee, a central member of the purchasing team, a familiar face around the district for nearly 24 years. Susan will be remembered for incredible determination, impeccable work ethic, and her deep love for many dogs, and she rescued and cared for. Susan is and will continue to miss her and for her family. The next person we're going to close in is a memory of Bill Jennings. And Marguerite, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah, so Bill Jennings died the next day on December 27th. You know, we take a lot of pride in the work that we do to protect the environment and to restore the salmon fishery and focus on water quality and be a good steward for the Delta. We don't do that by ourselves. Activists, you know, really usually are the ones who push us towards making those changes that then become institutional and a source of pride. And Bill Jennings is one of those people, maybe, along with David Nesmith, one of the two people that has really shaped the stewardship of this board. He, sort of orchestrated and agitated and instigated what turned out to be the cleanup of the Penn mines that dramatically improved water quality in the Delta and also helped lead to the fisheries recovery. And I met him when I was just starting as California Director of Clean Water Action in 1998, and he'd already been at it for 15 or 20 years, helping me to understand the complexity of water quality in the Delta in his role as Delta Keeper. He then, after many years as Delta Keeper, went on he co-founded Restore the Delta. He was the executive director of the California Sport Fishing Protection Alliance, and just, irascible, indefatigable, ornery, and lovable. Could have doubled as Santa Claus, I think, on some level. He is, his loss is big to the environmental community, and he will be much missed.
Thank you for those moving remarks. The meeting is now closed in both memory of Susan Rexon and Mr. Jennings. Thank you, and we'll be back here on the 24th of January at 1:15. Meeting is adjourned. Huh?
MLK Day.